Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, as you know, the Supreme Court in Trump versus United States held the president has absolute immunity to commit crimes in certain core areas of the president's responsibility. One of those core areas is the Justice Department. So in a breathtakingly dangerous and irresponsible decision, Justice Roberts and the majority held the president could commit crimes using the Department of Justice and be immune from prosecution. Justice Sotomayor correctly said this new immunity lies about like a loaded weapon. So the fear and the concern we have is that the incoming president will use that loaded weapon, that immunity, to commit crimes through the Department of Justice. And for that reason, it is all the more important that we have an attorney general who has the independence, the strength, the intestinal fortitude to say no to the president when it is necessary. So my first set of questions has to do whether you have the independence to say no when you must say no. And you can say this is hypothetical, but it is not hypothetical. So let me start with one very specific non-hypothetical. The president has said Jack Smith should go to jail. Will you investigate Jack Smith?
Senator, I haven't seen the file. I haven't seen the investigation. I haven't looked at anything. It would be irresponsible of me to make a commitment regarding anything without, you're a long practicing attorney, without looking at a file.
So you would need a factual predicate to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
Not a summary by you sitting here. Yes, sir.
And not a summary by the president either, right?
Absolutely.
So a summary by the president or his desire to investigate Jack Smith would not be enough for you to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
I will look at the facts and evidence in any case. And sitting here
today,
Senator, 72% of Americans
please, I only have 7
lost
minutes.
faith in the Department of Justice.
Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Sitting here today, yes or no?
Senator, I will look at the facts and the circumstances.
You can't answer that question.
Brought to me.
You're not a part of the department yet. There's no worry about divulging law enforcement sensitive information. So just tell us, are you aware? Just tell us, are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
Are you
horrible.
aware of a?
Do I know if he committed a crime? I have not looked.
You seem reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question. The president also wants to jail Liz Cheney. Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual basis to investigate Liz Cheney? Yes or no?
Senator, that's a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer that question.
No, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has asked me to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president
Liz.
has
We're
called,
also worried about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
President has
you know what
called
we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi, please answer my questions.
California right now
you
is
are aware,
through the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
your robberies are 87% higher than the national average.
My question is this.
That's what I want to be focused on, Senator.
Do you have the power to say no to the president? And what you're suggesting today by your non-answer is you don't have the independence to say no to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It also requires you, if you're going to be a good attorney general, to be able to tell hard truths to the president. So my questions now are, can you tell hard truths to the president? So let me start with an easy truth that you could speak to the president. Can you tell us, can you tell him that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Can you say that? Do you have the independence to say that? Do you have the gravitas, the stature, the intestinal fortitude to say, Donald Trump, you lost the 2020 election? Can you tell us that here today?
Senator, what I can tell you is I will never play politics. You're trying to engage me in a gotcha. I won't do it. I won't play politics with any ongoing investigation.
So let me ask you another.
Like you did leaking your colleague Devin Nunes's memo.
If you can't answer the question, let me ask you a different, what should be a simple truth, not a hard one. Was there massive fraud affecting the result of the 2020 election, yes or no?
Senator, I'm glad you asked that question. If you'll let me answer what I saw in Pennsylvania.
No, I asked a simple question about massive fraud.
I can only tell you what I saw in
No, I know you want to
Pennsylvania.
answer a different question, but my question is, can you tell us whether there was massive fraud affecting the results of the 2020 election? Yes or no? Was there
I
or
can
was there
tell
not?
you what I saw when I went
That's
as an
not my,
advocate
that's
to
not
the
my
campaign.
question. So you can't answer that question. You can't speak that even easy truth to us, let alone to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It will also be important that you give good advice to the president. Are you prepared to advise the president not to pardon people who beat police officers?
Senator, as I said, the pardons are at the direction of the president. We will look and we will advise. I will look at every case on a case.
so you
Let me
look at-
finish. On a case-by-case
Okay,
basis.
okay, good.
And I
let me
abhor violence to police officers.
follow up with that. So will it be your advice to the president, Mr. President, I know you said you want to issue hundreds of pardons on day one. Will it be your advice to the president? No, Mr. President, I need to go over them on a case-by-case basis. Do not issue blanket pardons. Will that be your advice to the president?
Senator, I have not looked at any of those files. If confirmed, I will look at the files
And
for
will
the
you be able to
pardons, as well
will
as
you
the
be able to
ongoing
review
investigation.
hundreds of cases on day one?
I will look at every file I am
Of course
asked
you
to
won't.
look
So
at.
will you advise the
Hey,
president?
can I
will
answer
you-
the question?
Well, my question
I would
is-
have plenty of staff. You said, of course you want.
You'll be able to review
Listen, I'm
hundreds
not
of
going to
cases on the first day?
mislead this body nor you.
All right, let me ask another question. You don't want to answer that. Let me ask
You were
another question.
censured by
It will
Congress, Senator, for
it will
comments just
also-
like this that
it
are
will
so reckless.
It will also be important for you to be able to preserve the records, the evidence of the department. Are you ready to commit that none of the evidence in the January 6th investigation will be destroyed under your watch?
Senator, I will follow the law. I will consult with ethical officials in the
Do you
department.
see any ethical basis to destroy evidence in the January 6th investigation? Then why can't you answer the question? Why can't you say, I commit to this committee, we will never destroy the evidence in the January 6th investigation? Why can't you give this committee and the American people that assurance?
Are you frightened because evidence was destroyed against President Trump that was false? Is that why you're
Why do
frightened
you
now?
have
I can't
difficulty?
believe this is even.
Why do you have difficulty answering that question?
I can't believe
Why do you
you're
have
asking such a
difficulty?
question.
Why do you have difficulty promising to preserve evidence at the Department of Justice? Why is that a difficult question?
I will follow the law.
It shouldn't be a difficult question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bundy, I know that you are pleased that we are moving to the end of round one, and we appreciate your being.
Thank you, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel I should address the mountains versus hills controversy. As a senator from a state in the West, I'm inclined to agree with Senator Curtis. But as I understand where the chair is from, and you are the chair, I'm inclined to agree with the chair.
Thank you.
So let me just say unequivocally, I've got friends on both sides of this issue, and I stand with my friends. Mr. Zeldin, as you're well aware, the horrific fires that have ravaged California over the last week have displaced thousands of people, resulted in the loss of more than 24 lives. As these fires continue to destroy Californians' homes, livelihoods, and so much more, it's more important than ever that California has the full support of the federal government to recover and respond. Fueled by severe drought conditions and strong Santa Ana winds, unimaginable events like these fires devastate communities and worsen Californians' water scarcity. When you were a state senator in New York, you were a member of the State Senate Bipartisan Task Force on Hurricane Sandy recovery. You applauded a comprehensive legislative package that included tax assessment relief for properties catastrophically damaged by the storm, revisions to regulatory obstacles that slow down the rebuilding process, and improvement and continued expansion of state insurance laws to help policymakers receive funds following a disaster, and more. And in response to Hurricane Sandy, the EPA supported FEMA and worked closely with federal agencies and the states of New Jersey and New York to assess damage and respond to environmental concerns. The EPA stepped in to assess the condition of drinking water and wastewater facilities, helped to get several damaged wastewater treatment plants in New Jersey up and running, evaluated conditions at hazardous waste sites, and assisted in the collection of debris and household hazardous waste. Can you provide Californians with the assurance that you will advocate the same strong recovery and response assistance from EPA as EPA provided to your then constituency in Long Island after Hurricane Sandy, if confirmed?
Senator, first off, congratulations on your election. I look forward to working with you on this committee. And we all, from the rest of the country, have been watching what is playing out for your constituents. And many of us know people who have been impacted and they've lost everything. It's hard to it's impossible for us to put ourselves in the shoes of your constituents right now. I, if confirmed, would want to not only know everything in my power to be able to do as EPA administrator to assist you in fighting for your constituents who have been devastated by these wildfires, but I would want to, in fact, do everything in my power to be able to assist, to make sure that this recovery is as speedy as possible. I would like to come to California to speak to those on the ground, hear any concerns that we need to take back with us to Washington, and to assist both you and Senator Padilla and your House colleagues to be able to fight for these constituents who have lost everything.
Thank you, Mr. Zeldin. We will welcome you to the state and look forward to your visit. After the Maui fires in August 2023, EPA crews removed more than 200 tons of hazardous materials from 1,400 plus properties in the fire-impacted areas. The EPA also deployed water emergency team members to provide on-the-ground guidance and technical assistance for stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water for the county of Maui. Do you commit also to prioritizing similar assistance for California to ensure that local water supplies are tested, treated, and restored to safe drinking water standards, just as EPA stepped in to do after the horrific Maui fires?
Senator, I would want to do everything in my power, if confirmed as EPA administrator, to be able to assist with that as well.
And I assume, Mr. Zeldin, your response will not depend on whether disaster strikes a red state or a blue state. You will equally work to speed relief to those Americans affected.
Yes, Senator. It does not matter what kind of a state you're from. All 50 states are going to be of the highest importance, regardless of where a disaster ever strikes anywhere in America.
Thank you. Let me touch on one other major issue that we discussed yesterday. That's the Tijuana River pollution crisis. This crisis has brought immense industrial waste and raw sewage over the border from Mexico into California, posing serious environmental and public health challenges to San Diego and Imperial County. We've had beaches shut down. We've had sealed training facilities deeply impacted. Coast Guard and Customs and Border personnel have routinely reported suffering from infections and gastrointestinal illnesses. Thanks to the work of Senator Padilla and Representative Scott Peters and others, we were able to secure $250 million in disaster supplemental relief in December, but EPA can play a pivotal role in this crisis as well. I would ask you to support EPA's Border Water Infrastructure Program, but also will you agree to review EPA's January 7th decision to deny requests to investigate the Tijuana River Valley for a potential Superfund designation? I'm not asking you to prejudge it, but will you agree to review it and consider whether a different judgment should be reached?
Yes, Senator.
I thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And at the outset, I want to tell you how very grateful I am to serve on this committee. California has not had a senator on the Agriculture Committee for over 30 years. And as a leading agricultural state, I'm really proud of the industry and all the people who work in it, and grateful to have a chance to represent them on this committee. And Senator Marshall, I wanted to tell you that a California legislator once made a name for himself by drinking a beaker of malathion to demonstrate his view that he thought it was that safe. I will not be doing that today. Ms. Rollins, thank you for being here today. When we met earlier this month to discuss your nomination, firefighters in Southern California had just begun efforts to contain two blazes. As we know now, this was only the beginning of what would ultimately amount to one of the most devastating wildfire disasters in the state's history, if not the nation's history. over the last 2.5 weeks in LA. It's been difficult for me to put into words how truly catastrophic these fires have been. Just the scope of them is beyond anything I would have ever imagined. Whole neighborhoods and communities just wiped out. The Forest Service has been playing an amazing role in the emergency response efforts, working hand in hand with state and local partners to secure resources and personnel. To aid California's wildfire response this month, the Forest Service deployed 2,300 federal firefighters, 12 large air tankers, 20 helicopters, 6 scoopers, and 8 modular airborne firefighting aircraft. Without these federal resources, the devastation in LA would have been far worse, and we're not done with it yet. We had the outbreak of another fire just yesterday. If confirmed as secretary, are you committed to deploying the same emergency resources to fight wildfires in blue states that would be deployed to fight wildfires in red states? Can we count on you not to discriminate among states in the vigor of the federal response?
Senator, thank you. And obviously, but it bears saying, since you asked, 100% yes. And to watch the devastation in your beautiful state has been heartbreaking for all of us, no matter if we're from red states or blue states. I think that hopefully, if there's any good that comes from this, if I'm confirmed, we can figure out how to be even a better, more impactful resource the next time this happens, and hopefully be able to work more closely, more quickly with those on the ground across blue states and red states.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. Wildland firefighters have been putting their lives on the line to protect my communities back home. And we need to make sure that we continue to encourage people to become wildland firefighters and that their compensation is commensurate with the critical and dangerous work that they do. I was speaking with one firefighter who was, I think, an LA fire department firefighter, not a wildland firefighter, but nonetheless facing the same risks, who told me that he wasn't sure he was going to make it out alive, that there were fires in front of him and behind him. His communications equipment was in and out. Yeah. Water was running low. He said it was the closest thing to hell that he could imagine. The key, I think, to recruiting and retaining people to do that kind of vital and dangerous work is to make sure they're well compensated. The bipartisan infrastructure law signed by President Biden included a long overdue pay raise for federal firefighters, but that raise is set to expire in March. This means our federal firefighters could once again be paid as low as $15 an hour to risk their lives to keep our communities safe. If confirmed as secretary, are you committed to fighting to extend the pay increase so that we continue to recruit and retain these wildland firefighters?
Thank you, Senator Schiff, and the tens of thousands of firefighters at the Forest Service, at USDA, in our peak seasons, and even now, I think we have close to 1,000 on the ground in your home state. I am 100% behind ensuring that we have the best firefighters, the best workforce that we can possibly have to fight these fires. I need to learn more about exactly what it is you're speaking about before a full commitment, but I will commit to this, that in all of my time with President Trump in the 8+ years I've been beside him in serving in his administration and answering the call for this position if confirmed, that he too believes that those who are putting their lives on the line every single day deserve the honor and the respect and the pay that goes along with those jobs. So I look forward to working with you to ensure as we move forward that that is happening in the most appropriate way.
I appreciate that. Let me turn to a different topic. During the president's first term, USDA had to allocate tens of billions of dollars to offset the financial impact of the tariffs and the reciprocal tariffs that other countries imposed on our agriculture and on our farmers. But that financial assistance offered to farmers impacted by the trade war was not equally distributed. Despite California's leading role in U.S. agriculture and the heavy tariffs imposed on specialty crop exports, California growers receive far less than their fair share in tariff assistance under the 2019 Market Facilitation Program. Out of hundreds of specialty crops grown in the U.S., only 8 crops received direct assistance. And in the end, approximately 1% of the nearly $15 billion in USDA allocated resources went to California specialty crop growers, so about 1%. And as you know, we're the leading state when it comes to specialty crops. If confirmed, are you committed to distributing all economic assistance, including trade relief, to states without regard for their political leanings?
I am committed to that. I think Senator Slotkin, even you and I discussed the specialty crops in Michigan when we met. I look forward to, I'm not familiar with the data that you laid out, but I look forward to learning more about that and being committed to ensuring that to the very, very best of our ability that this is appropriately adjudicated.
I appreciate that. I look forward to working together to make sure that that relief, if it should be necessary, is distributed equitably.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Tuberville.
Coach,
Coach.
thank you very much. Ms. Rollins, who'd ever known? 30 years ago, I'm a young coach at Texas A&M, and you're student body president.
That's
First
true.
time we met. Yep.
And we sat next to each other in lots of meetings. That's exactly right.
And look where we're at now.
I know. I know. It's an amazing world.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're going to be awesome.
Senator Schiff.
Mr. Patel, early in this hearing, Senator Durbin asked you about the January 6th choir of inmates whose song you promoted, and here's what you said. I did not have anything to do with the recording. I did not have anything to do with the recording. Do you stand by that testimony, Mr. Patel?
Senator, what I said was I didn't do the recording.
You said you didn't have anything to do with the recording, which is interesting because here's what you told Steve Bannon on his podcast. So what we thought would be cool is if we captured that audio and then, of course, had the greatest president, President Donald J. Trump, recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Then we went to a studio and recorded it, mastered it, digitized it, and put it out as a song now releasing exclusively on the War Room. We. If you had nothing to do with it, Mr. Patel, why did you tell Steve Bannon and all his listeners that you did?
That's why it says we, as you highlighted.
Yeah, and you're part of the we, right? When you say we, that includes you, doesn't it, Mr. Patel?
Not in every instance.
Well, that's new. So when you said we, you didn't really mean you. Is that your testimony?
Not unless you have a new definition for the word we.
Oh, okay. I always thought we included the person who pronounced the word, but maybe not. Well, you also said this, Mr. Patel. We were able to capture the recording thanks to their courageous singing, and we were able to take it to a studio. So let me ask you, Mr. Patel, after saying we took it to a studio, did you take it to a studio?
Me personally, no.
After you said that we digitized and recorded it and all that, did you take it to a studio and digitize and record it?
Me personally, no.
Okay, so you were lying to Steve Bannon and his audience. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was using the proverbial we appropriately, as you've identified.
The royal we. Oh, I see. And so you certainly promoted the hell out of it, though, didn't you?
I don't know what that means, but I promoted the heck out of raising money for families in need.
With promotions on social media and saying you were going to get this to #1 on the billboards, right, Mr. Patel?
I think it did.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Isn't that great? People who violently attack police have a #1 song thanks to you, Mr. Patel. That's something to be really proud of. Now, you've claimed, Mr. Patel, you didn't know about any of these people in the choir. Is that right?
I did not know about the violent offenders, and I did not participate in any of the violence in and around January 6th.
Tell me, Mr. Patel, what due diligence did you do to find out who was in the choir before you promoted their beautiful music? These people who assaulted law enforcement. What due diligence did you do?
Senator, I didn't record it myself.
So you did no due diligence before you promoted this song by these violent felons. Is that what you're telling us?
Senator, I did not record that myself.
So you're being considered for director of the FBI. And here you did no diligence to find out whether people you were associating with now the President of the United States in song were convicted of attacking police officers. Is that who we want running the FBI? I want you to turn around. There are Capitol Police officers behind you. They're guarding us. Take a look at them right now. Turn around.
I'm looking at you. You're talking to me.
No, look at them. I want you to look at them if you can, if you have the courage to look them in the eye, Mr. Patel, and tell them you're proud of what you did. Tell them you're proud that you raised money off of people that assaulted their colleagues, that pepper sprayed them, that beat them with poles. Tell them you're proud of what you did, Mr. Patel. They're right there. They're guarding you today. Tell them how proud you are.
That's an abject lie, and you know it. I've never, ever accepted violence against law enforcement. I've worked with these men and women, as you know,
You
my entire
glorified
life,
it in song,
and I did
Mr.
not
Patel.
make a single dime out of
In
it.
song. Well, let me.
How about you ask them if I have their backs, and let's see about that answer.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Patel. Let me ask you this. If an FBI director promoted a song of people who sprayed pepper spray in the face of an FBI agent, would you say they were fit to be director?
Mr. Schiff?
Yes or no? Would they be fit to be director?
I am fit to be the director of the FBI.
If you were the FBI director and you promoted a song with someone who beat an FBI agent with a pole, would you say you were fit to be FBI director?
Mr. Schiff, I am fit to be FBI director based on my 16 years in government service.
And yet you did all these things, Mr. Patel. You can say, oh, I support law enforcement. I decry violence against law enforcement. You can say all that. It's what you did, Mr. Patel, that matters. It's what you did that matters. Well, let me ask you about something else that you did, Mr. Patel. Did you claim that Donald Trump declassified all the documents at Mar-a-Lago? Did you claim that?
In what proceeding?
To the public, ever. Did you tell anyone that Donald Trump declassified all the documents at Mar-a-Lago?
From publicly available information, President Trump issued a declassification order on a variety of materials.
No, I'm just asking you, did you tell the public, did you tell anyone, did you make the claim that Donald Trump had declassified those hundreds of classified documents that were at Mar-a-Lago? Did you make that claim publicly?
From my best of my recollection, I said President Trump issued a declassification order to a large number of documents.
Yeah, and were you present when he declassified all the Mar-a-Lago documents?
Senator, I'm not saying he declassified all the Mar-a-Lago documents. I said President Trump declassified a large number of documents, and I would hope this committee and the rest of Congress would want to get those documents to the American people.
Mr. Patel, before a president or anyone declassified documents, wouldn't you want to know whether making the public would cause sources to be killed? Wouldn't you want to know that before you just declare they're all declassified? Wouldn't that be the responsible thing for a president to do?
It was the responsible thing for us to do. That's why they declassified the Nunes memo.
And did Donald Trump declassify?
And no one died.
And did Donald Trump ever ask any of the agencies who produced those documents whether declassifying them would put people's lives at risk? Did he ever do that, to your knowledge, Prakash Patel?
I don't know that he didn't. Do you?
No, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem, isn't it? So let me just ask, Mr. Chairman, if you would, Mr. Patel has said he has no problem. He would support the release of his grand jury testimony in that case. I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, to join me in requesting, with Mr. Patel's approval, the release of those grand jury transcripts. And I would also ask Mr. Patel whether you support the release of Volume 2 as it pertains to you of the special counsel's report. Any reference to you in the report, to your truthfulness, will you support the release to this committee of those sections of Volume 2 of special counsel's report?
I support following the law and providing whatever information the law requires.
Well, you said to the Wall Street Journal that you support transparency. Here's your chance, Mr. Patel. You support release of that to this committee, yes or no?
Your time's up. Before I call on Senator Tillis, I have letters here from law enforcement groups representing 310,000 officers supporting Mr. Patel's nomination. And they'd be like the Association of Police Organizations, National Police Association, United Federation of Police Officers, Police Benevolent Association, United Coalition for Public Safety. I'll put these in the record.
Recognize Senator Schiff for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve on this committee and represent California's 4.2 million small businesses, including tech startups, nonprofits, child care centers, rural businesses, the arts and entertainment industry, and women and minority-owned businesses. That number is growing daily, and I am very proud to represent these incredible business owners, innovators, and hardworking employees. Senator Loeffler, I appreciate the conversation that we had last week. I think it was last week. The weeks have seemed endless these days. As you know very well, horrific wildfires and high winds have ravaged California over the last month, displacing thousands of families and destroying homes, schools, community centers, places of worship, and countless small businesses. As these fires have impacted the livelihood of innumerable Californians, it is crucial that we know California will have the full support of the federal government to respond, to recover, and to rebuild. And we must rebuild resiliently. The SBA provides disaster assistance for homeowners, renters, nonprofits, and businesses of all sizes affected by natural disasters. I got to see this really in operation, visiting the Discovery Resource Centers in Los Angeles, in Westwood, and in Pasadena. SBA was on hand in large numbers to help small business owners and homeowners find what resources were available to them to help them recover and rebuild. I do want to echo the concern raised by my colleague, Senator Markey, about the freeze on federal funding. I know there has been a subsequent statement saying that the freeze order has been lifted, but not the freeze. None of us really know how to make heads or tails of that. But what concerns me is that even if the administration says that help to individuals will not be affected by this, if federal funding to SBA is curtailed, then it means SBA cannot make loans to individuals and to small businesses. And at a time when Californians desperately need that help, any delay, any uncertainty will just add additional injury. I've also been distressed by some of the calls to condition funding to California. California has contributed more to the recovery of other states than any other state in the union. And I want to ask you, first of all, to recommit to something we discussed privately, and that is to ensuring, if confirmed, that all states, not just California, but all states receive speedy relief for disaster victims and survivors without regard for whether a state is red or blue or green or yellow or anything else. Are you committed to, in a colorblind, political affiliation blind way, make sure that SBA assistance is speedily provided to small businesses in every state?
Senator, I appreciated our time in being in your office and discussing this important matter. Obviously, my prayers are with California, but our efforts will be there as well. As President Trump demonstrated by his first official trip, typically presidents might fly outside the country. He went to California. He immediately appointed a task force, getting the very capable Rick Grinnell involved. I think the president's actions have demonstrated his support for disaster relief. He's done it effectively in his last term, and I will support his efforts and leadership to ensure the people of California have the resources they need under President Trump's leadership.
Well, let me just say I was grateful the president came to Los Angeles. I felt that if he saw the damage, he could not help but be moved, and I think and hope that he was. I am concerned, though, about some of the statements he has made about tying disaster assistance to the passage of completely unrelated voter ID laws or, frankly, any other unrelated policy matter. Let me also raise the need to, not just with respect to the disaster in California, but elsewhere, make sure that the SBA is proceeding apace with a sense of urgency, that it is efficiently and effectively processing loan applications. I realize the balance is difficult because you have to avoid fraud, and there was massive fraud in among some who were applying for COVID relief. We do not want to see that repeated. But nevertheless, we don't want to see excessive delays either frankly, I think firing the Inspector General harms the ability to ferret out waste and fraud and abuse. But are you committed to doing everything you can to provide speedy attention to SBA applications while providing at the same time safeguards to avoid fraud?
Yes, I am, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to you both. Mr. Blanche, you and I have some common friends from your time in the Southern District of New York who speak highly of you. I take issue with my colleague, Senator Welch, in saying that SDNY is the flagship. Clearly, it's the Central District of California. But notwithstanding what I've heard from our mutual friends, I am gravely concerned in listening to your testimony, the degree to which you sound like you're still representing Donald Trump as his lawyer. Your criticism of the department, for example, filing a superseding indictment in the January 6th prosecution after a Supreme Court case so that the indictment would conform with that opinion, is the kind of objection I would expect to hear from a criminal defense lawyer, not the kind of statement I would expect to hear from a deputy attorney general. So let me just ask you, you have not been confirmed yet. Are you still Donald Trump's lawyer?
I mean, yes, my attorney-client relationship with President Trump remains, yes. The cases I was representing him on, to the extent that there's anything going on like the appeal in Manhattan, I'm not part of that.
But you're still representing him as you sit here today.
Well, I mean, representing him, there's no active matters. So
Correct, but you're still his lawyer.
I have an attorney-client relationship with President Trump.
And even if you're confirmed and you're no longer representing him as a criminal defendant, even then you still have continuing moral obligations as a member of the bar, legal obligations, to your former client, correct?
Like everybody at the Department of Justice with every one of their former clients.
Correct. So you'd have a continuing duty of loyalty and confidentiality when it comes to his communications, correct?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Bondi, as Attorney General, one of her first acts, established the Orwellian-sounding weaponization working group. In her memo, it says that the work of this weaponization group will be supported by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. That is the office that you will occupy. Would you agree that it would be a blatant conflict of interest as his criminal defense lawyer, as someone who has a continuing legal obligation to him as a former client, for you to participate in any of the work of that group as it pertains to the January 6th case that you represented him, or the Mar-a-Lago case where you represent him, or Alvin Bragg's office where you represent him? You would agree that that would be a very blatant conflict of interest?
I don't necessarily agree with that. There will be a conflict of interest potentially, but I quibble with the word blatant, and it depends on.
Okay.
I mean,
take out the word blatant, but isn't it a clear conflict of interest? You've represented him in these cases. You acknowledge you still have a continuing obligation to him in these cases. How could you possibly oversee an investigation or review of the prosecutors in these cases when you handled them? How is that not the most obvious conflict of interest?
I am not saying I can or I cannot. I'm saying I'm not going to say to you today, Senator, yes, there's a blatant conflict of interest.
Well,
why?
I
don't know what the work is.
Well, can't you acknowledge that if you're asked to supervise cases involving your own cases, that would be a conflict of interest?
That's a very different hypothetical. Certainly.
No, it's not hypothetical. You're subject to the order of the Attorney General now to support that working group. That working group is going to look at the January 6 cases and the Mar-a-Lago case, the cases you worked on. So can you acknowledge it would be a conflict for you to oversee that work?
What I'm not acknowledging is the broad strokes you're giving it. That work, for example. There will be conflicts, and I will not violate my ethical obligations.
Well, let me just ask you with great specificity, will you recuse yourself from overseeing the January 6th case, the Mar-a-Lago case, and the Alvin Bragg case? Will you recuse yourself from the working group's supervision of those investigations?
I will follow the rules as told to me by the experts, career prosecutors in the department when it comes to every recusal.
I've heard that.
But it's true.
Well, it may be true in the abstract,
No, it's
But
not abstract. It's true.
Well, here's the thing, Mr. Blanch, which you well know. You may very well get some opinion of an ethics lawyer appointed by the administration
I said
to tell you that you can exercise your discretion. If you believe it's a conflict, you can say you won't participate. If you don't, you can participate. So you may have discretion. So I'm asking you, how will you exercise that discretion? Will you recuse yourself from overseeing an investigation into matters where you were his lawyer? That shouldn't be hard.
You just gave a purely hypothetical because the hypothetical you just
this
described said that
is not
some-
hypothetical. This is in black and white. It says, and I will read it, I hereby establish the weaponization working group, which will be led by the Office of the Attorney General and supported by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. So this is what you're going to be asked to do. If you are given the discretion of overseeing cases in which you were his lawyer, will you recuse yourself?
It depends. The hypothetical you just described said that a career ethics attorney tells me I do not have to recuse for whatever reason. Because again, we are talking about hypotheticals. If the career Justice Department attorney says to me, you do not have to recuse yourself, I'm not going to sit here today and say that I will still say I will recuse myself.
I mean, that answers my question. You don't think it's a conflict of interest sufficient that you would sitting here today, tell me
That's
that
not
you
what I
were.
said.
Yeah, no, I
not
get,
what I said.
I get it. I find it remarkable where we are.
Well, you're restating something I didn't say, Senator.
No, I find it remarkable that you feel there's any world in which you could somehow participate in an investigation of people where you represented the president in that same investigation.
I didn't say
that. Well, you're not willing to commit to recusal, so that means you're willing to entertain supervising that work. So that tells me something. But let me move on because I think you've made your position clear. Let me ask you very specifically about the Mar-a-Lago case. The Justice Department formally had recommended Volume 2 be made public. Do you support Volume 2 of the report being made public?
No.
Okay. Do you commit to preserving the evidence in both those investigations?
I commit for sure to following the law and following the rules.
But you won't commit to preserving the evidence. Let's say you have the discretion about destroying the evidence. Do you commit today to preserving the evidence in both those cases?
I commit to following the law.
Okay. And if you can't commit to preserving the evidence in those cases in which you were the defense lawyer, I think, again, that speaks to the conflict of interest that you have as the president's defense lawyer.
I did not commit to it. I said I would follow the law.
No,
I'm not sure what.
Mr. Blanch, I understand everybody's going to say generically they'll follow the law. But I've asked you a simple question about whether you will preserve evidence, and you can't say yes.
No.
You can't say yes.
I hope every single DOJ attorney, political, career, or anybody would say they would follow the rules as it
And
regards.
I would hope that any DOJ attorney will say, I will always preserve evidence. There's no circumstance in which I will destroy evidence. That's what I would hope. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Schiff. Do you want to say what you were trying to say, or do you want me to move on?
You can move.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In California, really the top issue is housing, the lack of housing, lack of affordable housing. It is fundamentally a supply problem. We just don't have anywhere near enough housing, and we can move people off the streets into shelter, but if we're not building more housing and building it quickly, there'll simply be new people taking their place on the streets. So my question, let me address it to you, Mr. Harris, is what can we do to accelerate the building of housing that's affordable? How much of the challenge in terms of the timeliness or lack of timeliness in approving new projects is a federal problem, and how much of it is a state and local problem? And if it's more a state and local problem, are there things that we can do to incentivize local government and agencies to get to yes quicker on new housing?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. It's something that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts. We believe it is a supply problem, that the inventory is driving up the inflationary cost of shelter. And we think that of the 24% of the cost of a new home is related to government regulation, about, I don't know, a quarter of that is probably state and local. I mean, is federal. The remainder is state and local, and they're handling the heaviest part of that. When I have the opportunity to talk to lieutenant governors and governors that are saying, look, we need more housing in our state. I encourage them to look at the policies and procedures that local and state governments have in regard to housing. Have they updated their housing plan? Have they put barriers in place to keep the growth or disincentivize growth happening in their communities? And it's the same way could happen at the federal government. The federal government used highway dollars to get the speed limit regulated. They've used federal dollars to raise the drinking age. So I believe that if the federal government was to look at incentivizing these communities, either in applications for CDBG grants or any of the federal dollars that flow to municipalities, if they have consistent pro-housing, pro-growth opportunities, then I think that would incentivize them to do that, Senator.
Well, thank you. I look forward to working with you to identify how we can facilitate at the federal level, but also incentivize the local level, getting approvals of new housing more quickly. Mr. Booker, I wanted to ask you about offshore wind. We have two big offshore wind projects, both in Humboldt and Morro Bay, and I'm concerned about the rash of cancellations we're seeing of offshore wind projects in the last couple of years, and the new administration's executive order blocking leasing for offshore wind projects. I really don't understand the point of that. It's going to kill a lot of jobs and reduce a lot of energy. Is this the suspension of leasing, is this just designed to be a gift to the oil industry? Why would we want to stop offshore wind and all the jobs and the energy that creates?
Yeah, and I'm probably not the right guy to answer that question. But what I will say is that killing of offshore wind jobs is killing of American jobs. You know, this president, this administration talked about, you know, creating American jobs, the American dream. And when we start picking winners and losers of renewables versus oil and gas versus nuclear versus hydro, the end result of that, if a political appointee, is deciding who wins and who loses, at the end of the day, it's the American worker that loses if someone is chosen, if one industry is chosen after the other. That's why we've always been all of the above. We support all of that. We support American jobs. We support American workers. And I would encourage this administration to not pick winners and losers in the energy sector and let the market dictate where it makes sense. And on the East Coast and the West Coast, offshore wind has made sense. It's been an economical, viable, energy source that's creating good American jobs.
Well, thank you. And finally, on the transmission interconnection issue, this seems to me one of the biggest areas where we could really move forward with a lot of new energy projects and clean energy projects. Last year, California's grid operator, known as CAISO, stated that its interconnection queue now contains more than 3 times the generating capacity needed to achieve all of our state's renewable energy goals, 3 times the amount needed. How do we get that transmission working? And in particular, I'm curious, a lot of projects that apply to join the grid, they end up essentially dissolving even before they get the opportunity. Is that because of the delays in access to the grid, or is it because you have all these projects applying to the grid that are not necessarily financially viable or don't have their funding? Why are those projects falling out, and what do we do to get the grid working so that when you have a new project, it can come online in a time-effective way?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. There are a lot of projects that apply to the queue just to get in line. They might not be, 100% ready for deployment, but I think this all stems from a process that is very long because of the lack of transmission that is available on the other side. And there is a kind of chicken and egg problem as well, where you don't want to build a transmission line if you don't know that there's going to be generation on the other side of that line. You also don't want to put new generation into the queue if you don't think there's going to be a transmission line built. So there is kind of this chicken and egg problem as well that I think we have to address in interconnection specifically.
Yeah, and I know combining these two issues that in the Humboldt area where they have an offshore wind project, they're trying to figure out exactly that chicken and egg problem. It's one of the windiest places on Earth. There's some deep water challenges to that particular venue, but then they don't have the transmission capacity even if they built it tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sauer, you've served as one of the President's defense lawyers. Should cases arise in the Justice Department involving the same cases in which you represented him, will you recuse yourself?
Senator, thank you for the question. As reflected in the ethics agreement that I have signed and in the regulations of the Department of Justice, as to any matter that were to come before me that might require a recusal obligation, I would consult with the Department of Justice ethics officials and follow my recusal obligations.
So you'll consult with the career ethics lawyers at the department?
Yes, that's correct.
You are aware, of course, that the career ethics officials at the department have been fired, demoted, transferred. They no longer exist. The two people in that office are one of your fellow criminal defense lawyers of Donald Trump and a political appointee who graduated from law school just a few years ago. They don't exist. So who are you going to consult? Are you going to go to one of his other criminal defense lawyers to find out if you should recuse yourself?
Senator, I'm not aware of any personnel actions that you've described, so I can't speak directly to those. I've just recently been through a process where I was consulting closely with a career DOJ
I'll tell you,
ethics attorney.
Mr. Sauer, those actions have taken place. And the two appointees are political appointees. The people who will make the recusal recommendations to you are political appointees. One was Mr. Bove's former chief of staff. The other was a fellow criminal defense lawyer for Donald Trump. If that's who you're going to for recusal advice, no one can have confidence that that judgment will be made properly. But let me move on to another question. You took the position as Donald Trump's lawyer that he could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent and not be prosecuted for it unless he was impeached first. Should the president order the use of violence against a political appointment, will that continue to be your position as the lawyer for the United States? Will you represent to the court that any prosecution should be dismissed if the president is not first impeached?
Senator, I believe the exchange that you're referring to, which occurred during oral argument in the D.C. Circuit in that presidential immunity decision, I was asked a question about that, and what I responded was that the president may be prosecuted for an action like that, but under the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause, he must be first impeached and convicted by the Senate.
And as the judge in that argument made clear, that means your position is he cannot be prosecuted unless he's impeached first. So he can order the use of his office to use violence against a political opponent, and you would defend his ability to do that in any criminal prosecution unless he's impeached. Is that your testimony?
I believe this situation came up with respect to a real-world example.
Well, I'm giving you...
If I may.
I'm giving you... Yes.
President
You'll answer
Obama,
my question.
Yes, I believe I am answering the question. President Obama ordered the essential killing of U.S. citizens located abroad by drone strike. And my colleague on the other side of that case was
My question is not about President Obama and using a drone strike against a terrorist. My question is Donald Trump using his office to assassinate a political opponent. If he's not impeached for it, would you defend against any prosecution as Solicitor General?
The hypothetical you've offered respectfully is so outlandish, I don't know if I'm in a position to address it.
Well, you addressed it for the court, but you won't address it for the country in this hearing?
I think I've just said exactly the same response that I gave
Okay,
to the
then
court.
exactly the same response is that you would evidently defend him against prosecution for that. Let me move on to the last question. The department moved to dismiss a corruption case against the mayor of New York. The acting Southern District of New York U.S. attorney refused to undertake an action that she believed was deeply unethical. So then it fell on her number two, Hagan Scotton, to do the dirty deed of dismissing this case. This is what he said. Any assistant U.S. attorney would know our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials, in this way. if no lawyer with an earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me. My question to you, Mr. Sauer, is, would that be you?
Would
that be you if it fell to you to dismiss that case? Would you be the coward or fool willing to dismiss that case on behalf of the president?
I certainly can't speak to any official action that I might or might not take in a hypothetical scenario. I will say that there was a distressing lack of letters like this during the weaponization of justice.
Well, there is a disturbing presence of letters like this, and your answer tells me that it would be you. My colleagues have praised your legal skills. I have no doubt about your knowledge of the law. But to me, you can't be a good lawyer if you use the law to subvert the law, if you use our system to undermine our system, and I'm deeply afraid that's what you've done, and that's what you will do in this position. I yield back.
Let me say to the three of you, thank you for agreeing to serve our nation. Thank you for going to the Department of Justice. I will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here, and Mr. Guffey, I appreciate your advocacy and want to express my condolence for the loss of your son. I can't imagine the trauma that you and your family have been through, but I appreciate your taking that trauma and using it to protect other families. I have not had a chance as a new member of the Senate to really study the multiple approaches of the various bills, although some I've supported in the House. But I wanted to ask you, Professor, we established Section 230 for the reasons I think you implied, which is it was a nascent industry. They urged us to do so that we would not stifle innovation. They also made the argument that without 230, they would not moderate content because they would be sued if they did, and this would encourage them to moderate content. Well, there may have been a time where they moderated content, but those days seem to be over. It certainly wasn't enacted because it was believed necessary for the First Amendment. First Amendment stands on its own 2 feet. In the absence of 230, companies could still plead a First Amendment defense to any case. What is your preferred approach? That is it a repeal of 230? Is it changing it from an immunity to some form of defense? Is it to cabin 230 in some way by narrowing the scope? What are the merits of the various approaches?
Thank you, Senator. I would say that it's important to, a couple of things. I would say that there was discussion in the deep background about this free internet nascent industry. And when we look at the policies and the findings at the beginning of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, there is languages to that. But I would repeat, the overwhelming background and discussion was about the child protection piece. And therefore, I think that the concern, I think that better than repealing the entire thing is to keep the C2 language, which gives a cover, gives a protection to a platform if they do, and specifically, if they remove anything they consider to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. That will protect them. That's all they need. They do not need C1, which is what has been turned into this de facto near absolute immunity. I think also adding the state's ability to proceed is an important thing. I think outside of 230 is holding them liable when they host this material, like that's has been discussed at length as well. So I think that those and some of the other things that I've listed, but I don't want to use up too much of your time, all work together to respond to the complex crime.
And counsel, in your representation of clients in this area, what do you believe would be most helpful in terms of making sure that you can get the discovery you need and that that we have established the right protections and the right burdens in terms of the platforms and the pipelines?
Thank you. I agree. We are long overdue to just abolish Section 230. But what's important is that clients need to get into discovery so that they can actually know what, the extent of the problem. And the only way we can do that is if the standard is reasonable for parents to plead. If we have to show that the company knew about that picture or that exact victim, that exact perpetrator, there's no way a client's going to be able to overcome a motion to dismiss and get into discovery. So we need to actually have standards like negligence, which the law already affords in almost all causes of action.
So let me ask this question. I don't think there's any doubt that if the companies devoted their technological capability to trying to solve this problem, that they could make enormous gains. They wouldn't be able to eliminate the problem altogether, but nonetheless, they could prove very effective. What would you propose the new standard be then? That is, if it's not going to be possible to completely do away with this, the standard can't be perfection. How would you define the standard of care that you would expect the industry to follow, given that it hasn't had to follow any standard with the protections of 230?
And if you could just quickly answer that.
Sure. Well, these are products, so strict liability should apply here. If these companies have created a defective product, then all users should be able to sue them without having to prove a duty if the product injured them.
This is one example of some things that have been wrong. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Eisenberg, you served during the first administration as the NSC legal advisor. In that capacity, you must have participated in dozens, if not hundreds, of principal meetings organized by the National Security Advisor. Did you conduct any of those meetings by text chat that involved military strike plans?
No, I don't believe so.
So the entire first 4 years of the Trump administration, you never had a text chat conversation about plans to strike targets using an unencrypted or using a commercial app?
Well, I'm not aware of any such incident anyhow.
And you didn't do that because that would have been a terrible national security breach of protocol, would not?
I would have to know a lot more to know whether that would be a breach.
Would you really need to know more than a conversation about military targets, the time of the attack, the location of the targets, the ordnance being used?
Sure, you'd want to know whether the device is up to a certain level so that it could. I mean, you might make one that
okay, we're talking about a commercial app like Signal. Would it ever be appropriate to discuss imminent plans to strike military targets on a commercial app?
I still think it's very difficult to answer that question in the abstract. I mean, I can think of circumstances in which you could, sure.
Oh, well, give us a circumstance in which you can talk about an imminent military attack unknown to the public, where it would be appropriate to do so on a commercial app.
Okay, something absolutely urgent happens and needs to go right now, and your normal communication systems don't work. I mean, there's an example where you may have to do something like that.
And where you have access to classified facilities, it would be completely inappropriate, wouldn't it?
I still need to know more.
Really? Wow. And you want to lead the National Security Department at the DOJ, and you would need to know more?
Yes, Senator, I'd like to lead the NSD, and I think I'm exceptionally qualified to do so.
And do you fail to believe the NSA and the DOD when they say that the use of commercial apps like Signal is a security threat and inappropriate for confidential or sensitive data?
I haven't heard what either of those entities has said.
So you don't have any idea what the view of the intelligence community is about the use of commercial apps to conduct government business involving classified or sensitive national security information? You have no idea what the position is?
No, I'm sure the position is that in general that should never happen.
Okay, so what happened in this Signal chat should never have happened. Do you agree with that?
No, as I said before, I would need to know more.
Have you read the Signal chat?
I have not yet.
Yeah, you have not read it. Are you desiring to be willfully blind to what just happened?
No, I was trying to prepare for this hearing, among other things.
Oh, and you didn't anticipate you'd be asked about this? Or is it because you anticipated you would be asked about this, you didn't want to inform yourself of this incredible breach of national security?
There are millions of things going on in the world at any given time, so I just didn't happen to learn about this one.
Oh, I see. There are millions of things going on. Yes, I'm sure there are millions of things going on in the world. But this happens to be probably the biggest national security story of the month, which included a lot of other national security stories, including a war in the Middle East and including capitulation to Putin and Russia. But you just happened to neglect to read this one. Is that what we're led to believe?
I just happened not to read it, that's all.
Well, let me ask you this. If you're using a commercial app to discuss the identity of targets, their locations, and that information were to become public, it could compromise those operations, couldn't it?
It depends on what the operation is and where in the operation.
Well, let's say an operation to strike targets in Yemen, Houthi targets that identify, say, a top missile operative and the location of the girlfriend's building. Those kind of specific details discussed on a commercial app could jeopardize that operation if it became public.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
It depends on the circumstances. And
Well, I
that's
just gave you the
And that's why I'm not
circumstances.
going to answer a hypothetical question.
Well, it's not hypothetical. I wish to hell it were hypothetical. This just happened. This was shared with a journalist on a commercial app. You need more information than that? Well, how about discussing denigrating our European allies on a commercial app? Could that have diplomatic fallout?
I don't know the circumstances.
Really? So the vice president's conversations on this app, others joining in and disparaging Europe, this is completely new information to you. You're unaware. You can't comment on whether that could interfere with our relationship with our closest allies?
No, I heard of the incident. I just, at this point, hadn't had time to look at it closely.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer, sir, and before I make decisions and form opinions, I need to look at the facts carefully.
Yeah, and you don't hide from the facts as a lawyer. And if you want to head the National Security Division at the Department of Justice, you don't stick your head in the sand when we've had a serious breach of our national security so that you don't have to answer uncomfortable questions.
That's
Mr.
not
Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do find it interesting that my Democrat colleagues are so enraged by this non-story and had nothing to say when we had a president who literally...
Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Donahue, how long have you been practicing as a member of the bar?
Since 2021, Senator.
So for roughly 4 years?
That's correct, Senator. But I graduated law school years before that in 2017.
And as a practicing lawyer 4 years, do you know how many attorneys you'll be supervising at the EPA?
Yes, Senator. It's over 200.
Over 200 lawyers?
Yes. But thankfully, there is a very well laid out hierarchical structure.
And you would be at the top of that hierarchy, right?
That's correct.
So let me ask you, with your 4 years of experience, can you open a criminal investigation without evidence of wrongdoing?
Senator, I'm not a crim pro expert, but the answer to your question would be no.
And if an attorney was asked to open a criminal investigation without probable cause to believe there was evidence of a crime, that would be improper and an abuse of authority, would it not?
It very well may be, yes, Senator.
And you are aware, aren't you, that a senior Department of Justice official with 24 years of experience practicing as an AUSA was asked to write a letter to a bank about the greenhouse gas reduction fund and to assert that the funds needed to be frozen because of a criminal investigation. You are aware of that?
I read about this in the press, as I'm sure you did. I was not involved and still not involved in whatever criminal probe is ongoing. I'm not.
But you have been a participant in meetings and discussions over trying to go after the greenhouse gas reduction funds, have you not?
Senator, OGC is always involved in matters of great significance as this to provide sound legal advice.
Well, I'm not asking about the office generally. I'm asking about you personally. You personally have been involved in discussions with others at EPA about going after these funds, have you not?
Senator, I've been involved in a variety of discussions, including those concerning the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, mostly on the civil defense side once we were sued by 3 of the big recipients.
Knowing that it would be improper and abuse of power to open investigation or to allege that investigation was ongoing without evidence of wrongdoing, you're aware that a senior attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office of 24 years resigned because she felt she could not ethically write such a letter to the bank or open such an investigation. Are you aware of that?
As I indicated before, Senator, I did see those news reports, but I'm not intimately familiar with her work, or any.
Well, let me ask you this: if you were asked by Lee Zeldin to instruct the lawyers in the criminal division at EPA to open an investigation without evidence of a crime, would you instruct the attorneys to do it nonetheless?
Senator, the direct answer to your question would be no, I will follow the law.
And what should be the repercussion be if attorneys, as Denise Chung alleges, instructed her to do so in the absence of probable cause? What should the consequence be for those lawyers?
I wouldn't want to comment on that, Senator.
Well, I'd like you to comment on it. You're going to be overseeing the department. You're going to be responsible for disciplining attorneys who engage in unethical conduct. So what would your recommendation be for how to discipline an attorney that would use the coercive power of the government, would announce an investigation without a basis for a political reason? What would your recommendation be? Should they continue to work at the EPA, or should they continue to work in the Justice Department?
Senator, I wouldn't like to answer hypotheticals, but...
Well, this is all too real a circumstance, not hypothetical. And the actions that are taking place right now that have caused senior prosecutors to resign over this action by EPA, that have caused other prosecutors to resign over other Department of Justice misconduct regarding the mayor of New York, the illegal actions to target law firms that represent clients or have in the past adverse to the president's personal interests. These are all terrible abuses of the coercive power of the federal government. Its most dangerous power, the power to prosecute people. We need people in all these departments who are willing to say no and are willing to sanction those who engage in that kind of unethical conduct. Madam Chair, I yield back.
That would take us to Senator Schiff.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. I want to raise concern about a number of projects in California that are still waiting for an answer. In the MEGA program, $283 million for the Port of Long Beach rail construction project, $166 million for Contra Costa's Innovate 680 program, $53 million for a multimode facility in Madera. In the infra bill, $105 million for Redwood City, SR 84 and US 101, $98 million for Caltrans, SR 99, Tulare improvements. In the Rural Surface Transportation Program, $41 million for the City of Tracy, Corral Hollow Road Project, $35 million for Yuba County, Plumas Lake Boulevard. In FHWA, $102 million for Caltrans I-5, $56 million for SJV Air Pollution Control District, $55 million for California Energy Commission. In Reconnecting Communities, $26 million for the Housing Authority in LA, $11 million for the City of Goleta Multipurpose Path. In the RAISE program, $25 million for BART, $23 million for the Palmdale Grade Separation Project. This is a partial list, and these projects really haven't received word, so they're unclear of the status of the projects. And the delays might end up killing the projects. The delays will certainly end up costing more to do these projects as material costs go up and other costs increase. And I'm raising the concern because We don't know whether these are changes in policy that are affecting grants that have already been approved, or whether this is a lack of personnel to administer the grants, and I'm further concerned with layoffs that might further delay getting this money out the door to do these vital infrastructure projects. So would ask for your comments generally on when you think these cities and counties will hear from you and your department, but also whether you're mindful of the fact that delay has a cost, a real dollars and cents cost.
I appreciate the question, Senator. I would, maybe to give the whole number, there's been 200 awards announced for California to the tune of $1.74 billion. There's a lot of money that announcements have been made over the course of the last 3 years where you don't have grant agreements on those announcements. I don't know that you were here for this, but there's 3,200 announcements that were made by the last administration where there's no grant agreements. That's unheard of. So I'm going to work through those announcements and get grant agreements so we can build those projects that you're talking about. And just if I can quickly, I don't want the Republicans to get annoyed at me, but Senator Whitehouse got a bridge, and in California we're going to announce is it Madera 14 Expressway? That one has been completed. We're almost ready to sign that, as well as the Otay Mesa, $150 million. That's at the border crossing. I believe that one's ready to go as well. So I've got 3 Republican or Democrat announcements. I don't have anything for you Republicans yet, but we're just going through the projects.
Well, we're a very bipartisan committee.
You are.
And I know I speak for my Republican colleagues when I say they're delighted with money coming to my state.
We'll see how that goes after the
Not quite
hearing.
as delighted as if it was going to their state, but, well, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate it. Anything you can do to accelerate the approval process, and can you speak to how the cuts in personnel may be impacting the timeliness of approvals in this area?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So that hasn't impacted how we're able to move through the grant agreement process. We still have more employees in the department than we did when Joe Biden took office, but it's the sheer volume that I was left with. And just to maybe remake this point, in between Obama and Donald Trump, there was 47 projects announced between Election Day and inauguration. Between Trump and Biden, there was 107 projects announced between Election Day and Inauguration Day. And in this last term, there was about 950 projects announced. So there's been a massive number of announcements, historic. But then that means our department has to do the work of, truly the work is doing the grant agreements. The announcements are fun, but grant agreements are the work, and I'm going to get through that, but it's going to take me some time, and I'd ask for some patience from the committee just because the workload is so significant.
Well, and Mr. Secretary, if there's any further information you need and you're having any delay on our end, please have your staff reach out to mine, and we want to make sure that we get you all the information necessary to move these projects forward.
I appreciate that, Senator.
Thank you. Yield back.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Seralto, I wanted to follow up with you on some of the questions that the ranking member and Peter Welch asked. As you know, the Marshal Service core mission is enshrined in law, and it is clear and unambiguous. The law states that the Marshal Service primary role and mission is to provide for the security of federal judges and to, quote, obey, execute, and enforce all orders. That is, orders of the federal courts, even those that the President may disagree with. At the same time, the U.S. Marshals operates within the Justice Department under the authority and direction of the Attorney General. Throughout our nation's history, we've largely avoided conflict between these two authorities. The statutory obligation for the U.S. Marshals Service to enforce court orders while at the same time being under the authority of the Attorney General. That is because we've been a nation of laws governed by the rule of law and the separation of powers. But that constitutional balance is now at risk. And you, Mr. Seralto, may be thrust in the middle of that crisis. I know you have responded that Mr. Welch's question is hypothetical. That is, what if you're asked to, or you're ordered by a court to enforce something against the Justice Department orders you to refuse. But only part of it is hypothetical. We have seen already the Supreme Court of the United States order the administration to facilitate the return of someone they improperly rendered to a prison in El Salvador. And we've seen the administration refuse to facilitate that person's return. We've seen in a related case a federal judge issue an order to show cause why the administration should not be held in contempt. If that judge rules that the administration is in contempt and issues an order to effectuate her ruling, will you enforce that court order?
Senator, the U.S. Marshal Service, myself, if I'm confirmed, every deputy that has ever sworn oath to the Marshal Service will enforce all lawful orders issued by a federal court.
So if a judge holds administration in contempt and issues an order to either seize someone from the administration or to effectuate the service of legal process on that person, you will follow that court order?
Senator, if it's a legal, if it's a lawful order, absolutely, we will enforce all lawful orders issued by a federal court.
And you'll rely on the legal counsel within the Marshal's service to give you advice on what is lawful for you to execute?
Yes, Senator.
One of the roles of the Marshals is also to provide security for judges. So my question is, and this is a question, frankly, that was at least reportedly raised by a judge at a meeting of the Judicial Conference. What happens if the administration orders the Marshal Service not to provide protection to a particular judge who has issued an opinion that the president disagrees with? Will you nevertheless provide protection? And you can say that question is hypothetical, and yet only part of it is hypothetical. The president has ordered security for former officials of his own administration to be revoked, people like Pompeo, for example. So he has already acted politically to remove people's security, not based on whether the threat against them has diminished, but rather based on his personal agenda and political agenda. Will you, as required by law, provide security for every judge, whether they're favored or disfavored by the president?
Senator, I do think it's a hypothetical. I do not believe that President Trump would ever issue an order like that, but I will reiterate that the Marshal Service mission and primary role is to provide safety for our judges. It is to enforce, execute
then,
all.
Mr. Rose, let me just ask you simply and not hypothetically, will you commit to providing security for each and every federal judge?
Senator, for the last 6.5 years, I have done so in the Southern District of Florida. If I am confirmed, I pledge to you that we will continue to keep all our judges safe. It is the basic premise of the United States Marshal Service. It's the star in our badge.
Finally, Mr. Serolto, are you aware of allegations that Mr. Musk requested that the Marshal Service deputize some of his private security to effectuate the operations of Doge?
Senator, I'm lightly aware of that based on social media, media reports. I don't have social media, unfortunately.
And what criteria would you use to deputize anyone, a marshal, who does not occupy a federal position? What would your practice be?
Senator, there's a policy within the Marshal Service. I believe what you're discussing is a special deputation, which is primarily for protection. It does not encumber Title 18 authority, arrest powers. However, when presented with something like that, I would study it. I would look to see why, what the needs are. It is a policy that I'd have to review when I get there, if confirmed. And I pledge to you that I would look into it.
Well, I hope you'll protect the Marshal Service from any abuse of the powers of deputation to effectuate a political arm of the White House. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I would like to enter a...
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindberg, as you know, I come from California, and
We are very much in the specialty crop business, really proud of the whole agricultural industry in California and to be the #1 agriculture producing state, as I remind my colleagues. We traditionally, by virtue of having such a heavy concentration of specialty crops, haven't participated as much in the work of the USDA in the sense of being a recipient of support from the department. But there are a number of programs that are hugely important to us: the market access program, the technical assistance for specialty crop program, the regional agricultural promotional program, and the assisting specialty crop exports. I'd like to get your thoughts on those programs, whether you see their value, whether we can count on you to be a champion for those efforts.
Senator, thank you for the question. And my wife's uncle is actually a fruit farmer in the great state of California, longtime specialty crop producer there. I've spoken with him many times about the importance of these exact programs with respect to helping create those markets for our specialty crops overseas. And I absolutely commit to working with our export promotion programs to make sure our fruit farmers and other specialty crop producers have those chances to export their products.
I would say also that a lot of the research that's done by USDA helps the specialty crop farms in dealing with different pests, diseases, et cetera, that really threaten the livelihood of what they produce. And the layoff of some of these important personnel is of grave concern. So we would also ask you to push back against the firing of these important scientists and researchers who are doing work that can literally save us billions in agricultural output. Mr. Westhill, I wanted to ask you about the USDA's history and the present. And in terms of the history, obviously the department has a incredible history, very important institution in our society going back to the days of Lincoln. But yet it also has a record of some pervasive discrimination. What is your commitment to making sure that the USDA serves a diverse group of farmers? In California, we not only have an extraordinarily diverse set of crops, we have an extraordinarily diverse set of farmers. And I want to make sure that farm programs are accessible to all the farmers, and not only is there no discrimination, but there are affirmative efforts made to make sure that farmers are aware of these programs and that that there is the outreach so that all can participate. And I'd like to get your thoughts on combating the historic discrimination within the department and also making sure that we're reaching a diverse group of farmers in the country.
Senator, thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your interest in civil rights at USDA and its history. There's a long history of discrimination at USDA. I've read the book on it. I've talked to your colleagues about those issues. I didn't see those issues when I served in the role as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the first term, but to the extent that they exist at all today, that there are barriers to accessing USDA programs or participating as a rancher or a farmer, no matter what you're producing, with USDA programs. We want to make sure that those barriers are knocked down. I'm committed to that. I'm committed to making sure that everyone can do business with USDA on equal footing, no matter their race or any other protected characteristic under civil rights law.
Thank you. And Mr. Lindberg, I don't know whether this is going to become necessary. I guess it depends on how long the tariff fight goes on. Farmers in California, like I think around the country, would much rather farm and trade and sell than be reliant on government support. But if there is a fund established to help farmers that are injured by retaliatory or other tariffs, in the past, specialty crop farmers have really not participated very much, and those in California even less. What can you do to make sure that there are resources available to help make those farmers whole, even as there has traditionally been much more attention on the commodity growers?
Senator, I believe that there were going to be a number of new trade deals signed in the not too distant future, that those programs will not be necessary, but should they become necessary, I will absolutely commit to making sure that the specialty crop producers in our country are represented and have the chance to apply just like any other farm commodity groups.
And that may require some adjustment of how those programs operate, since The trees have a much longer life, a much higher investment, and many of the farmers don't have the same long history of farming the same crops. So there are some artificial barriers, I think, to participation, and would like to work with you to overcome them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you for the work you've done to try to reform the practices of PBMs. I have a long family history in this area. My grandfather was a pharmacist. My great-uncle turns 100 this week, was a pharmacist. My father worked in a pharmacy growing up. And of course, I've had the same experience that so many of my constituents have had. Dr. Sood, thank you for coming all the way from California. Let me ask you about my experience, because it's left me wondering what player in the scheme of things was responsible for my experience, which was minor compared to what others have experienced, and that is I was on a medication prescribed by my physician, which was working very well without side effect.
Senator Schiff, when you're done, will you adjourn the meeting?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much.
And I may have to cut it short to get out in time to vote. So I was on medicine that was worked with no side effects. I got a letter, I think either from my insurer or PBM, saying we're taking you off that medicine and putting you on a different one. And I called my physician and I said, why are we changing my medication? It was working perfectly. Well, probably someone is going to get paid more money by moving you to something else. And I said, well, is there an appeal? And he said, yeah, but you'll lose. And I said, well, let's appeal anyway. So we appealed, and he was right, I lost. And then I said, is there any other remedy? He says, well, you can appeal one more time, but you will lose again. We appealed one more time, I lost again. So who made the decision to, well, obviously it wasn't my physician, who made the decision that I was better off on a different medication?
It was the PBM, and I've had a similar experience where my university changed their PBM, and there's a generic medicine, you know, FDA approved, been in the market for 30 years, well established, suddenly wasn't covered because of the change in PBM.
California experienced a 56% increase, its Department of Managed Health Care, in health plan spending on prescription drugs from 2017 to 2023. How much of that do you think is because of consolidation in the industry? Where would you apportion the increased costs?
So I was one of the experts who, you know, back in 2017, opposed the CVS-Aetna merger on vertical grounds because I thought it would reduce competition in the pharmacy market, reduce competition in the insurance market, and lead to higher costs. I haven't seen the study, but I agree with the general hypothesis that vertical integration could be responsible for higher costs.
Well, I wish I had more time to ask questions, but I'm likely not to make it in time to vote without adjourning. Thank you all for your testimony today. This concludes our hearing. I want to thank each witness for taking the time to share your experience. Written questions can be submitted for the record until May 20th. I'll ask the witnesses to answer and return the questions to the committee as quickly as possible. This hearing is adjourned.
The chair, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on Senator Kennedy's line of question and ask a similar line of yes or no questions just to put a finer point and make sure that your answers are as definitive as they sounded. So let me start with you, Mr. Edlow. Yes or no, would you ever advise the administration that it could ignore or disregard an applicable district court order because you believe the Supreme Court will ultimately overturn it?
Senator, as I said before,
yes, just a yes or no question.
I don't believe I'll ever be
Senator,
in that position.
But you may not. But just like you answered Senator Kennedy, I want to make sure that you were not misleading anyone. So let me ask the question again. Would you ever advise the administration that it could disregard an applicable district court opinion or order because you believe the Supreme Court will ultimately overturn it? Yes or no?
I don't want to speculate, but I can't see a situation where I would advise to not follow a court order.
So your answer is no, you would never advise them to disregard a district court order, even if you thought the Supreme Court
Again,
would
I don't want to
overturn
speak. I don't want to speak.
I just want you to be precise and answer yes or no.
I can't see a time where I would do that. No.
Okay. Mr. Geiser, yes or no?
Thank you very much, Senator Schiff. I would advise clients to follow court orders.
Even if you believe the Supreme Court would ultimately overturn the district court?
Well, Senator, as far as
yes or no?
The answer is the same. The president has said he
Well,
will follow court
the
orders.
same answer, yes or no?
Senator, the president has said he
You
will follow.
were able to answer Senator Kennedy, but I want to make sure that you were not misleading Senator Kennedy. Yes or no, would you ever advise the administration it could ignore a district court order because you believed the Supreme Court would ultimately rule otherwise? Yes or no, would you ever advise them that?
Senator, applicable court orders should be followed.
That's not my question. Yes or no?
Senator, you asked me.
Yes or no, Mr. Geiser? It's a simple question.
Senator?
Mr. Geiser, you were able to answer Senator Kennedy. Are you raising a doubt now about your answers to Senator Kennedy because you can't answer this question?
Senator, I would advise clients to follow applicable court.
Is that a yes or no?
I would advise clients to follow applicable.
Is that a yes or no? Let me repeat the question so there's no ambiguity about it. Would you ever advise the administration, you're going to be, if you're confirmed, heading the Office of Legal Counsel that helps determine whether actions are lawless or lawful, would you ever advise the administration that it could ignore an applicable district court opinion or order because you believed the Supreme Court would ultimately overturn the order? Yes or no?
Senator, if I'm confirmed to lead the Office of Legal Counsel,
All right,
I would.
you're not answering the question. So I guess the answer is to Senator Kennedy, you just might advise the administration to ignore a district court order. How about you, counsel?
Thank you, Senator Schiff. In my role as director, I am not
asking yes or no.
Well, I would thank you. I wish to clarify. I'm not, if confirmed, a director. I'm not acting in a legal capacity at all. I'm part of the executive agency branch, and therefore would not be advising clients on any aspects of that.
Well, would it be appropriate in your view for anyone else among legal counsel to do so?
In general, court orders should be followed and respected. There are situations which I recall back from law school between branches.
I guess you're not able to answer the question either. Counsel, how about you?
Senator Schiff, thank you. I mean, I agree. I don't believe it's appropriate to address this hypothetical. At the Department of Justice.
Okay, so you want to revise your answer to Senator Kennedy then? That is, there may be circumstances where you advise the administration to disregard a district court of opinion because you believe the Supreme Court might rule otherwise. Is that your opinion?
As a lawyer, the answer is it depends.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll make sure Senator Kennedy is aware that you just might, it depends, advise the administration to ignore court orders.
Senator,
let me ask another question. Mr. Geiser, would you agree that it would be unlawful for the president to accept a gift from a foreign state without the consent of Congress? Would you agree that's unlawful?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator.
Yes or no?
Whether something is lawful or not, I would always want to look.
I'm just asking you a simple question. Is it unlawful for the president to accept a gift from a foreign state without the consent of Congress? Very simple question.
Senator, as a lawyer, I would always give my...
I'm not asking you for a preamble, just yes or no.
Well, Senator Schiff, it depends on the fact.
Well, Mr. Geiser, where is the depends on the facts of Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, which says, no person holding any office shall, without consent of Congress, accept any present from any foreign state. That's the Constitution. Doesn't say, well, it depends, or it might, or maybe. It says, no person shall do so. Do you find that ambiguous?
Senator,
I thought you were supposed to be the strict constructionists. This is what the Constitution says. Is there an exception for $400 million planes from Gulf emirs?
Senator,
is there an exception for that?
On behalf of the chair, Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do wonder, though, that whether or not we should set up.
Thank you.
We've got a high-level conference back here. We've got a member that's trying to get over here, so we're going to give them a minute, and if they come in a minute or so, we're in good shape. If not, then we'll go ahead and adjourn. But let's give them a chance. So we're going to not adjourn officially for another minute or two, but you can yawn, take a break, do whatever you want to do for a second. It's hard with the votes. We have as many of you know, we have we did not enforce the get over and vote on time rule. It was very, very lax, so they've really tightened it up. And now if you're not over there within a certain period of time, they actually call the vote and you just miss out. So some things we can do and not do, but primarily we're here to vote. So, you guys got any other questions or comments? Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Chairman. The success of California's agriculture industry is at least partially thanks to the very specialized knowledge and work of USDA experts. It's principally the success of the hardworking people in the agriculture industry who are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. But as two examples of the role that USDA experts play, and there are many more, APHIS protects California growers against citrus greening disease, and ARS conducts research on the efficacy and efficiency of irrigated agriculture in vine and tree orchards. Mr. Hoskins and Dr. Hutchins, based on your experience at USDA, can you both briefly speak to the importance of APHIS, AMS, ARS, NEFA, and ERS staff at the department in securing the safety, innovation, and overall success of California's specialty crop industry?
So thank you for that question, Senator. I guess I'll go first, just alphabetically, not in substance. But I would just say, when I think about that question, first from just an APHIS programmatic side, the mandate and authorities, this committee, this Congress, this chamber has given the agency to help work in support and collaboration with your growers, your ag community in California. The California Department of Food and Ag, which plays an essential role as a partner in identifying, mitigating, and preventing both the plant pest side of the equation and animal disease surveillance and response activities. So when I look at that portfolio, no matter where APHIS is or what issue we're talking about, the state partnership is absolutely essential. And CDFA has been instrumental and indispensable in that equation for as long as I've had the privilege to work in this space. To your question on staffing, as someone who's not at the department currently and doesn't have the benefit of internal briefings or assessments of bodies or resources or capacity, all I can say is I've heard Secretary Rollins state publicly her support and mandate that APHIS will ensure an adequate workforce to meet their mandate.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you for the question. I've had the pleasure of traveling your state extensively. I've seen the great agriculture there, from the rice fields near Sacramento to the almond plantations to the Salinas Valley to the cotton. And it's a wondrous place from an agricultural standpoint. It's a candy land for sure. So, and without a doubt, the federal agencies and USDA research, as well as the University of California and the local agencies, have had a tremendous impact on the success of agriculture in your state, particularly with the areas where developing methods and technologies for drought tolerance and so forth. So what I can speak to is the fact that those types of activities have been critically important to California, and they will continue to be.
And Mr. Hoskins, can you comment on the work that can be done to reduce barriers to participation in the commodity procurement programs for small, medium, new, or beginning farmers, and how we can create more opportunities for more farmers to provide healthy food?
Thank you for that question, Senator. When I think about the commodity procurement program, the Section 32 authority at AMS and their mandate to facilitate surplus removal and how their assessment is done to execute on that mandate, I also think about just some of the complexities that the agency is required to comply with under larger than just USDA authorities or compliance. It's the Federal Procurement Act and the cascade of regulations and steps vendors or participants have to go through to access that program. So I don't pretend to understand that matrix, but what I could commit to is if I were confirmed, I would want to work with you, your office, your staff, this committee, the Senate, to better understand how or if or when the agency can reduce some of those impediments to participation for producers of all size.
Thank you.
Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Herfendorfer, welcome. I'm sure aware that it was recently said by President Trump, quote, "It was suggested that I use the Federalist Society as a recommending source on judges. I did so, but then realized that they were under the thumb of a real sleazebag named Leonard Leo, a bad person who, in his own way, probably hates America." I want to ask you about this. You're a member of the Federalist Society, correct?
That's correct.
And for how long? For how many years?
I believe I joined in law school, Senator.
So over a decade ago, then.
About a decade.
And were you recommended for a judgeship by the Federalist Society?
I have no knowledge of why I was recommended or whether the Federalist Society had any role.
The Federalist Society does, though, recommend judges to the administration, do they not, or did they not?
I had no involvement in that. I'm not sure. I've seen reporting to suggest they had some involvement, but I have no personal knowledge of that, Senator.
Do you think, having been a member of the Federalist Society for over a decade, that they're under the thumb of a real sleazebag named Leonard Leo? Is that your view?
In my perspective, the Federalist Society has been a wonderful place to get together with the many, many lawyers who are members and learn about the law and discuss issues. Aside from my own experience, as a judicial nominee, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on any public policy debate about the Federalist Society or the particular quotation you're referencing.
Do you know Leonard Leo?
I've met him a few times at Federalist Society events, but I wouldn't say that I know him well or that he knows me.
Do you concur with the President's assessment that he's a sleazebag?
Again, Senator, that type of interpersonal or political dispute I don't think is appropriate for me to comment on as a judicial nominee, given that either the President or Mr. Leo could come before me as party to a litigation.
You clerked for Judge Richard Leon, did you not, on the district court?
That is correct.
How would you describe Judge Leon?
When I worked for Judge Leon, I had a wonderful experience. I think he was a judge who treated everybody with fairness and impartiality and was wonderful to his law clerks, and it was a very enjoyable year clerking for him.
And he took his responsibility seriously?
In my experience, yes.
And upheld the law and the Constitution, in your view?
We did our best to do so.
You're aware that he ruled against the administration and against the President with respect to the President's executive order against Wilmer Hale?
I am aware.
Do you agree with Judge Leon's decision that the executive order was unlawful?
That's pending litigation, and it would be very inappropriate for me to express a view on the merits of that litigation or any other active litigation.
Well, no, the president has attacked the Federalist Society because the judges it has recommended don't always do what the president wants. Is that the role of a judge? Is that the role of Judge Leon or any other judge? Would that be your role to do what the president wants?
That would not be my role. My role would be to carry out my oath, which would be to the Constitution first and foremost, and any other laws that bind the rules of decision.
So you're willing to rule against the administration, against Donald Trump's executive orders if you believe them to be unlawful?
If that's what the law requires, Senator.
You are also an attorney at Williams & Connolly, is that correct?
That's correct.
And they represent Perkins Coie in the executive order case against that law firm, do they not?
I am aware of that fact.
Is it important that law firms be able to represent individuals or causes that are unpopular and that are at times in disagreement with the administration?
So certainly as a lawyer who represents a client that has views that people don't always agree with, I think it's an important role of an attorney to take on matters no matter the political popularity.
So you think it's appropriate for law firms to take on cases against the administration?
I would not purport to limit any party in the representation that it would choose, and I don't want to be seen as commenting on any of the active litigation involving these issues.
And would you agree that it would be inappropriate for a president or administration to try to punish a law firm for taking on a client whose interest was adverse to the administration?
So, Senator, you're referencing, I believe, the pending litigation, and again, I've articulated why it's important for clients to have law firms.
I'm not referencing any particular case. I'm asking you as a general principle, should the President of the United States be able to retaliate against a law firm that takes a case for a client whose interest is adverse to the administration?
Again, embedded in the premise of that question is something that is referencing active litigation, and I, just as a matter of prudence, don't want to be seen as weighing in either way on whether that has occurred in any of these executive order cases. I stand by my answer that it is, of course, the role of a lawyer to represent clients consistent with the bounds of the law and ethics, and that's what I've tried to do in my role.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Professor.
That went into effect in 2022, requiring direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies like 23andMe to obtain Californians' express consent for the collection, use, or disclosure of their genetic data. Under this law, Californians are also able to delete their accounts and genetic data and to destroy the biological samples they provided to these companies. In the context of 23andMe's bankruptcy, can Californians still exercise these deletion rights? Or does the bankruptcy process somehow interfere with, override, or otherwise affect our state's privacy protections?
Thank you. Bankruptcy proceedings do not override any applicable law. So state law and federal law are recognized in bankruptcy proceedings. Whatever rights your consumers have outside bankruptcy, they'll have inside bankruptcy in terms of their legal rights.
And if the database, 23andMe's database, is sold as a bankruptcy asset, what obligations would the acquiring company have under federal or California law to maintain those same security standards?
So the same laws that would apply now to 23andMe would presumably apply to any buyer.
Even if this is not a California company operating in some other state, they would still be bound post-bankruptcy to California's privacy standards?
To the extent that California privacy standards apply, yes, they would.
And is a commitment made by an acquiring company somehow enforceable? Apart from California's law, vis-a-vis residents of other states, is a promise made by an acquiring company somehow legally enforceable, or is it only as good as the person's intention to comply with that commitment?
So contractual promises are enforceable up to the point that they can be enforced. That's not a great answer, but again, our statement is a contract is a promise to perform or to pay damages. It's possible for parties to breach that agreement, in which case the party that on the other side of it would be entitled to damages for the harm that they've experienced. But
I
without,
guess, let's say I'm acquiring 23andMe's data set. I commit to maintaining the deletion provisions, et cetera, complying with California law, even if it's not required somehow. I acquire the data set. I don't comply.
right.
Has my offer to comply or my commitment pre-bankruptcy, has that somehow turned into a binding contract with the owners of the genetic data, the people who have the genetic data?
So it would depend on who you were in privity with, I guess, in terms of the contract, to use, a fancy legal term. A contract is between two parties, and so you have to have an agreement between those two parties. And I guess the question in those situations, if you were promising to abide by the commitment, who would be on the other side of that promise? Who would be able to enforce it?
Right. Well, it would sound like the consumer would not be on the other side of that promise. It would be more one of the parties to the bankruptcy, which would then we would be then reliant on them to enforce that promise. Does that analysis make sense?
That makes sense to me.
And what controls are in place, Mr. Savage, maybe I can ask you this question. What controls are in place to prevent any unauthorized access or misuse of information during the bankruptcy proceedings?
23andMe is, basically places data security and data privacy is top of mind. We basically have continued to maintain a strong system of security, making sure all of our data is encrypted. The genetic data is stored separately from any consumer identifying information, identifying who that genetic data belongs to. We have enhanced our security processes, especially around bankruptcy, understanding that there is additional threats. And, basically on the consumer side, we have since enacted two-factor authentication so basically there is a second level of either an SMS text message or an email verification when somebody's trying to access their account, and then placed additional restrictions if
I can just interrupt with one last question because my time is going to expire. How do we know that an acquiring company or entity or person would maintain the same security standards that you have over privacy, and even those standards were subject to hack?
Senator, the good news here is there's two potential buyers at this point for 23andMe. The first is Regeneron, a American $55 billion market cap pharmaceutical company who actually has data security over genomic data today, and TTAM Research Institute which would be maintaining the same security standards as 23andMe.
Senator Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on the senator's question, so would you commit today to the same privacy standards that you have demanding those of the company that purchases 23andMe?
Mr. Bouvet, I want to turn to the meeting that Mr. Ruvani, the whistleblower, has written an extensive complaint about. The hearing started with the chairman reading a social media post by the Deputy Attorney General Blanche, who is present today but not under oath, nor is that social media post under oath. So let me ask you, since you are under oath, in the complaint it says, Bouvet stated that DOJ would need to consider telling the courts, fuck you, and ignoring any such court order. Did you say anything of that kind in the meeting?
Senator, I have no recollection of saying anything of that kind. To the extent I use...
Wouldn't you recall, Mr. Bouvet, if you said or suggested during a meeting with Justice Department lawyers that maybe they should consider telling the court, fuck you? It seems to me that would be something you'd remember, unless that's the kind of thing you say frequently.
Well, I've certainly said things encouraging litigators at the department to fight hard for valid positions that we have to take in defense of our clients.
And have you frequently suggested that they say fuck you and ignore court orders? Is that also something you frequently do, such you might not remember doing it on this occasion?
No, and as I explained, I have never directed...
So did you or did you not make those comments during that meeting?
Which comments, Senator?
You really need me to repeat it? Did you suggest, as Mr. Ruvani wrote, that DOJ would need to consider telling the courts, fuck you, and ignore any such court order?
I did not suggest that there would be any need to consider ignoring court orders. At the point of that meeting, there were no court orders to discuss.
Well, did you suggest telling the courts, fuck you in any manner?
I don't recall.
You just don't remember that. Well, let me ask you this. It also says in the complaint, Beauvais indicated and stressed to all in attendance that the planes needed to take off no matter what. These are the planes that a judge was ordering not be used to render people to a maximum security prison outside the country. Did you say during that meeting, did you stress to all in attendance that the planes needed to take off no matter what?
Senator, your characterization is not accurate.
It's not my characterization. It's the characterization of a decorated prosecutor who was in that meeting. Are you saying that he's lying?
As I said at the beginning of the hearing.
No, I'm not interested in what you said at the beginning of the hearing. I'm interested in whether you stressed to people in attendance that the planes needed to take off no matter what. Did you say that?
I certainly conveyed the importance of the upcoming operation.
Well, don't paraphrase here. Did you tell people in attendance the planes needed to take off no matter what?
I don't recall the specific words that I used.
Wouldn't you recall saying that if you had instructed that the planes needed to take off no matter what, including whether the court ordered otherwise? You wouldn't remember that?
This is a mischaracterization, Senator. There were no court orders at this point.
Well, there was a court order, wasn't there?
No,
wasn't there a court order by Judge Boasberg, if not in this specific case, then in related cases, that people not be sent out of the country until the court could rule? Wasn't there a court order?
Not at the time of that meeting, Senator.
Did you participate in the decision not to disseminate that oral court order prior to the written court order to other agencies so those planes would not take off, so those planes would turn around? Were you involved in the decision to withhold that court order from the responsible agencies?
I think it's clear that I participated
in this. Yes or no?
I participated in this matter, and I'm not going to get into the contents of legal advice. I did, over the course of time, as many lawyers have.
No, I'm not interested in over the course of time. I'm interested in whether you participated in the willful violation of court orders as alleged in this complaint. Let me ask you this, Mr. Beauvais, if there are notes of that meeting, will you provide them to this committee?
I defer to the committee and to the executive branch on the procedure.
And if the committee requests them, will you provide those notes to the committee?
I defer to the executive branch on the handling of that request.
And let me ask you about notes from another meeting, which you're contesting here, and that is the meeting over the decision to dismiss the case in New York, the corruption case against the mayor of New York. According to Ms. Sassoon, the U.S. attorney at the time, during the meeting with Adams' attorneys, where she described Adams' attorneys repeatedly urging what amounted to a quid pro quo, that you admonished one of the lawyers in the room to stop taking notes. Is that true?
I don't believe I instructed that attorney to stop taking notes. I did remark on the fact that he was taking extensive notes, yes.
And why did it concern you that he was taking notes of that meeting?
Because at that point in the meeting, we were discussing who was responsible for media leaks, and I was making the point that only the prosecutors had created an extensive record that could support detailed leaks.
And you were concerned, were you, that information about this potential quid pro quo might become public? Was that the concern?
I've explained that there was no quid pro quo.
Will you provide the notes of that meeting, which you, according to the U.S. attorney, instructed be collected at the end of the meeting?
I think a member of my staff may have given that instruction outside my presence, and I defer to the committee and the executive branch on records requests and how those should be handled.
Well, I would request that we seek these records, which go to the truthfulness or lack of truthfulness of this witness. There's a reason why, if I may, my colleagues have gone over at least as much as this. There must be a reason why prosecutors quit rather than following orders from you they considered unethical. There must be a reason why prosecutors complained about you in your own office, why defense attorneys complained about you in your own office, why the judge in the case involving the dismissal of the charges in New York said everything here smacks of a bargain. You testified earlier that the objective evidence overwhelmingly made it clear that it was not a bargain. That there must be a reason why everyone disagrees with you, Mr. Beauvais, and people feel it necessary to give up a job they love at the Department of Justice and quit because they won't go along with what they consider unethical and immoral orders from you. There must be a reason why that is so true of so many, and this court needs to get to the bottom of it. I yield back.
Well, as a former judge, I like being referred to as the court. But as the chair, I will turn it over to Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam.
Good timing.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the line of questioning many of us had for Mr. Beauvais, since you were present for that, and ask you all the same question. And Judge Artel, I'll start with you. Would it ever be appropriate for the Justice Department to take the position that they should effectively tell a district court to pound sand and ignore a court order?
Well, I just think that there are exceptions, as I indicated before. There's stays that can be pursued. There's motions for rehearing, appeals.
Yeah, that's not my question. Would it ever be appropriate for the Justice Department to tell the court, we're going to ignore your order?
I mean, Abraham Lincoln did that with the Dred Scott case.
I'm hoping we're not going to go back to the Civil War or Dred Scott. You seem to be having some hesitancy about this question. Would you have difficulty if the government ignored your order in holding them in contempt?
Senator, I would not have any difficulty enforcing any court order that I enter. Obviously, if I enter a court order, I would expect it to be followed by no matter who the party is.
Including by the Justice Department under the Trump administration?
Including the government as well, yes.
Okay. Mr. Dudek, same question.
I would expect the parties in a case before me to follow the order regardless of who they are.
Okay. Same question.
Yes, Senator. I too would expect orders to be followed. Of course, if I suspected that there were a problem or an issue with that, there is a process for ascertaining whether a court order has not been followed, and I would follow that process.
And that process involves an order to show cause why they shouldn't be held in contempt, and there are judges holding those hearings contemporaneous with this one. Let's say you hold that hearing and you find that the Justice Department has been in willful contempt, knowing and willful contempt. What kind of sanctions would you entertain under those circumstances?
Senator, it's hard to answer in the abstract. I know that there are a host of sanctions that can be entered on a finding of contempt. I would not hesitate to enter an appropriate sanction, whatever the case would require. I'd have to, look at the particular kind of matter, the severity and extent of the violation of the court order, and those would all be things that would be considered in such a hearing. But what I can say just as a general matter is I would expect that any lawful order that I issue with jurisdiction over the case and the parties should be followed unless or until stayed or reversed or disturbed otherwise on appeal.
Well, and building on that answer, Ms. Gaylord-Moe, let's say that the contempt involved rendering someone out of the country to a maximum security prison in violation of their right to be heard, in violation of habeas corpus. What kind of sanction would you order if you found after a hearing and in order to show cause that the government was willfully in contempt?
Senator, I'm obviously not going to comment on any pending cases, and I'm not going to weigh in on political controversies. I can tell you that the answer to your question is, do I expect the parties in a case that's pending in front of me to comply with my orders? And the answer is yes.
And you would expect that, notwithstanding the fact that they may choose to appeal or choose to disagree with your order, in the absence of a higher court judgment that stays your order, you would expect and you would indeed compel the government to comply, would you not?
As a judge, I follow the law, and I expect the parties to do the same.
Okay, that doesn't really answer my question. So in the absence of an appeal from your order, in the absence of a stay of your judgment, if the government refuses your order, would you hold them in contempt?
If the elements that would make contempt appropriate under the law were met, and I held a hearing that I felt satisfied that at the conclusion the law compelled the entry of contempt sanctions, then absolutely I would do that.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Schiff, and thank you so much for our nominees for being here with us today. I know people traveled far and wide to join you. That means they support you and wish all the best in your future careers. Certainly, it is an honor for me. I often take over this gavel from the chair and serve as...
For being here, and thank you for your public service. Greatly appreciate it. I served for almost 6 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, worked very closely with the DEA when I did. In fact, worked on bringing to justice one of the people involved in the kidnap, torture, murder of Enrique Camarena. So I was interested to see the video at the outset of this hearing and thrilled when I learned of Cara Quintero's extradition to the United States. Mr. Allen, I want to ask you a couple questions about your work in L.A. I'm grateful for all the efforts to stop the scourge of fentanyl and the smuggling in this country, which has killed so many Americans. My questions go to the fact that I want to see that focus continue, and I don't want these questions to be perceived as a criticism of you. You're following the instructions you're getting from headquarters. But I am concerned, and for the reason that Senator Padilla alluded to, that to the degree that your resources are diverted to immigration operations against nonviolent immigrants, against farm workers or garment workers or restaurant workers, I am worried about diverting the focus away from interdicting fentanyl and going after these cartels. So let me ask you, how many field agents do you have in LA?
So approximately 200.
And of the 200 field agents in LA, how many of them have, in the last 150 days, worked on immigration enforcement?
That's a tough question to answer, sir, just because it's such an ebb and flow. It's not like we have people permanently assigned to just work immigration enforcement. Because, as I said before, we're really primarily focused on continuing our work in drug enforcement, and the crossovers that you know fall into place with illegal immigration. I mean, that's where we
give us your best ballpark. Have a third of them been assigned at least temporarily, or half of them, or more? Is everyone participating to some degree?
I would say at any one time, that's a decent estimate. But as again,
sorry, which estimate? About 30%.
At any one time, not necessarily at one time, but at any given time. There could be 5%, there could be 2%, there could be 30%. It just depends on what's going on that day and what type of support we can offer.
But give us some sense. I want to know what kind of call on your resources this is.
Well, I can actually give you a couple of good examples of things we've done recently.
I'm really not looking for examples. I'm looking for how much your workforce is being diverted to immigration enforcement and away from things that they were doing previously.
Well, specifically immigration enforcement only, that's not what we're focused on. It's just not, sir.
Okay, so how many of the 200 agents have worked in immigration enforcement?
At any given time, anybody could have.
No, just overall. Have all 200 been called away at some point to work on immigration enforcement?
No, sir.
Okay. So how many have?
I really would have a hard time giving you an answer on that, sir.
You're running the office.
I am, yes.
And you're having to make decisions about allocating resources.
Yes, sir.
And you've got investigations to pursue that were ongoing at the time of the administration. And you're having to take agents off of one thing to put them on another. I know how strapped the resources were even before this administration. Yeah. So you may not want to be precise here, but we need some sense of what kind of resources are being diverted here. So what percentage of your agents would you say, what's your best estimate, what percentage have been called to do immigration enforcement? What percentage of the 200 have at some point in the last 150 days been called away to work on an immigration enforcement action?
Sir, the reason I'm having a hard time answering the question is because we work immigration enforcement as it relates to narcotics enforcement. So the two are intimately combined, and that's what our agents are doing.
Okay.
Well, for instance,
you know what I'm asking you. With all due respect, you know what I'm asking you. So, what percentage of your agents have been called away to work on immigration raids? That is a departure from what you were doing before 150 days ago.
Sir, my people do not do strictly immigration raids.
What percentage of your agents have worked on immigration enforcement in the last 150 days? Can you give me an estimate?
Again, it's not just immigration enforcement, sir. So
okay. Yeah, you clearly don't want to answer the question, Mr. Allen.
and this is part of the problem, and that is we are devoting, by some estimates in the FBI, 45% of our agents in major cities, it's a public report, to immigration enforcement actions that are 90% of which going after nonviolent offenders. You're taking them away from somewhere. You're taking them away from somewhere. And you clearly don't want to tell us how much you're taking them away or how much work they're doing on this and what other enforcement actions, what other interdiction they might be pulled away from. But we need answers. Mr. Perez, are the estimates accurate that 45% of agents in major cities are being called on to work on immigration now? Is that accurate?
No, sir, I would say that's not entirely accurate. I think that maybe comes from some data that looked at
So what is the accurate percentage?
So nationally, sir, I don't have an exact percentage. I would say it's probably, it ebbs and flows. It could be between 5 to 10%. But again, that's been a temporary surge. We're realigning, we're surging now towards potential terrorism threats.
And the 5 to 10% that are being called away to work on immigration, what were they working on previously?
It varies, sir, by office. It depends. But we have a history in the FBI, sir, of surging resources towards terrorism or cyber attacks or cartels. So those are decisions made by our field offices to potentially pull someone off of an assignment. But I would say that's common, sir. In the 100+ years in the FBI, we surge resources, we realign resources for potential threats.
Well, I don't think there's anything common about the scope of what you're being called upon to do with these immigration enforcement actions. But I know my time has expired, and I yield the mic to Senator Britt.
Thank you very much. On the note that we were just talking about, the stuff that I have read is that actually the seizures of drugs have...
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Dillon, you recently announced that DOJ was launching an investigation into the University of California over its UC 2030 capacity plan, which notes that future growth of faculty and students should result in campus populations that better reflect and tap the talent of underrepresented populations who represent the majority of Californians. In the SFFA versus Harvard opinion, the Supreme Court held that nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise, allowing universities to continue assessing students' experience with race on an individualized basis. In that opinion, in his concurrence, Justice Thomas praised the University of California for achieving diversity through race-neutral policies, including preferences for low-income applicants and first-generation students, and recruiting efforts targeted at areas with substantial populations of people of color. Are the race-neutral policies like those used by University of California, which Justice Thomas explicitly praised in that opinion, now considered by you to be illegal DEI?
Well, Senator, first of all, the investigation that we've opened is an investigation, and it's an investigation into the hiring policies of the University of California system, not the admissions policies. That said, I have absolutely seen abuses in the admissions policies in using race as a crude proxy for discrimination.
That's not the question I asked you. Are the race-neutral policies praised by Justice Thomas now considered by you to be illegal DEI?
I think you're mixing apples and oranges.
Well,
I can't really answer your question.
You can answer my question and say, yes, they are now illegal. That is what Justice Thomas praised in terms of race-neutral policies, which include preferences for low-income applicants, first-generation students, things like that. Are you now saying that what Justice Thomas praised is now illegal in your view?
Senator, there's a difference between what you see on paper and what you see in reality, and I reject your premise. I reject your premise that how California describes its admissions practices is
about whether
reality.
You subscribe to the Supreme Court's opinion or whether you disagree with Justice Thomas' concurrence. You can answer that question, can't you?
In the abstract, yes. In reality, what you're describing does not exist in the UC system.
Okay, so Justice Thomas got it wrong. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that.
Well, you are saying that because he was praising the policies of the University of California. You seem to be saying now that any university that gives a preference to low-income applicants is engaged in illegal DEI, or if they put a focus on first-generation students, that's somehow impermissible. After all the years of criticism of cancel culture, you seem to want to cancel any institution
that has views that you disagree with. In answer to the questions about law firms, you want to cancel law firms because they take on unpopular clients to you, to the administration. That is, if a firm represents someone with an adverse interest to the administration, which is their First Amendment right to do, and I would also say their duty to do, you would cancel them. You would cancel universities like Harvard or the University of Virginia that take positions and exercise their First Amendment rights contrary to what you think the administration wants to see. You would cancel the Associated Press for not using the ridiculous nomenclature of the Gulf of America. You're canceling now the Wall Street Journal because the Wall Street Journal had the audacity to publish an article about Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein. So this is what's going on in this administration. You've devastated the Civil Rights Division. Hundreds of attorneys, 368, have departed since January of this year. There's been a mass exodus from the Civil Rights Department. It is just a shell of what it used to be. They're being canceled. They're being canceled by you, by the department. Anyone that stands up to this president is at risk of being canceled. And I think what you're doing to use the sledgehammer of federal funding with universities to try to coerce them to accepting your right-wing agenda is disgraceful. And using that cudgel will have far-reaching implications, attacking research done by universities, academic independence done by universities. It will establish a dangerous precedent that can be abused by a president of any party, and we should recognize that on a bipartisan basis, even though it does not appear that we do. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hall, I want to know how EPA and DOJ came to the conclusion to drop the agency's complaint against GEO, a contractor that operates the ICE facility in Adalanto, California. My staff have personally visited this facility because Congress has a fundamental role in conducting oversight of private entities that receive federal contracts and awards. During the last administration, EPA found that the company had violated the law 1,137 times by failing to provide employees with personal protective equipment. The pesticide chemical known as HALT comes with a warning that says, quote, causes irreversible eye damage and skin burns, harmful if swallowed or absorbed through the skin. Do not get in eyes, on skin, or on clothing. The private prison company was facing $4 million in fines under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act for irresponsible use of a chemical disinfectant that is hazardous to human health. But your agency dropped the case. A former EPA enforcement official called the Trump administration's choice to drop the case a, quote, complete surrender. So I want to know what happened here. The facility is in my state, and I want to know why the EPA completely surrendered to this private prison company after a change in administration. So let me begin with one question. Are you aware that GEO Group gave President Trump's super PAC $1 million and contributed $500,000 to his inauguration?
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to address that. And Ranking Member Whitehouse raised it in my meeting with him, so I'm prepared to walk through it. I do want to say up front, I was not involved in the decision-making. It was purely an EPA case because it was an administrative case going to an administrative adjudication. I am aware of that fact, or the general nature of those facts, not the specific dollar amounts now, based on reporting by ProPublica after the case had already been decided to be dismissed. And honestly, that's how I came to awareness of those facts.
You became, just for clarity, you became aware of this from the ProPublica report after the decision was made.
Yes, Senator.
But do you know whether those who were involved in making the decision were aware that GEO was a major contributor to the tune of $1.5 million to President Trump or his committees?
The decision was made by career management officials, and to my knowledge, they were not aware of any of those facts, nor did they enter the decision-making for that case.
And do you know whether the White House had any communication with those responsible for the dismissal of the case?
I do not specifically know, but I do not believe they did.
And what is the basis of your speculation that you don't believe that they did? How would you know?
Because I have talked with the career management officials, they didn't indicate that there was any other influence, and that was purely decided by those career management officials.
Okay, well, having talked with them, did you discuss the president's the contribution by the company to the president?
I mentioned the fact that that there was a ProPublica article on it, and they indicated that the career management official making that decision indicated he was not aware of it.
So the person who made the decision to dismiss the case claimed to you that he had no knowledge that GEO was a major contributor to the president or his committees?
That is my understanding.
Well, you said you had this conversation, so I don't want to ask your understanding. Is that what this person told you?
Yes.
And what is your view of the EPA dropping this case? What's the basis for this?
So thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to discuss that, because I think it's important to be able to explain that. The career management officials that took a look at this took a look at the facts and the law. And so on the law, they took a look at the legal risk, including to the FIFRA enforcement program from proceeding with the case on an administrative hearing, as well as the facts and the equities, and they appropriately decided to dismiss it. I think there was three. So in my understanding of just how I think about the case, I think there were three critical points. One is that the case was only about whether or not the gloves that were used by those employees were labeled consistently with the disinfectant, not whether or not anybody was harmed. That was not part of the FIFRA administrative adjudication case. Second, GEO Group had on its own gone out and gotten an independent laboratory to assess whether or not those gloves were protective, and found that it was, and they had an expert witness willing to testify at the administrative hearing to that fact. And three, there was an article in the National Law Review that just came out yesterday indicating that EPA enforcement has not only continued but stepped up against antimicrobial products that are mislabeled or unregistered, and I think those are the ones that are harmful.
And if I could, one more question, Madam Chair. 1,137 violations. This wasn't as if there was a single episode or single use of a glove. Over what period of time were those 1,137 violations? And doesn't that indicate a pattern practice of willful disregard of the law?
Senator, my understanding, based on the complaint in the administrative case and not based on anything else, is that it occurred sometime between 2021 and 2023. And that was just based on the fact that the gloves were used routinely in cleanings. And no, I don't think it demonstrates a pattern or practice of willful disregard of the law, because again, the key question was whether or not those gloves were appropriate and for use with that disinfectant. And I think that was a contested factual issue, and I think it was appropriate that enforcement resources were not used to continue to prosecute that case.
I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just got to say, though, that to dismiss this case in light of the vast contributions and in contradiction to the efforts that were made in the previous administration does look like a complete surrender to me. And I hope you will respond to the document inquiries that were made by Sheldon Whitehouse. Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Tung, you just said that you're an originalist and a textualist. So let me ask you, the Emoluments Clause provides that no person holding public office shall accept any present of any kind, whatever, from any king, prince, or foreign state. Do you believe the language in the Emoluments Clause that says any present of any kind, whatever, means any present of any kind, whatever?
Senator, you are quoting the text of the Emoluments Clause, and I cannot dispute with the text of the Emoluments Clause.
So it would apply to any present, including an airplane?
It would apply to the president, I believe, your Senator.
And I take it as an originalist, you would accept that the founders would have never subscribed to the idea that a president in their time could have accepted a multi-$100 million gift from a foreign state?
Senator, the premise of your question implicates live issues in the public and pursuant to the canons of judicial ethics.
Well, let me just ask you, would the founders have believed that if a president received 100 camels from a foreign state, that that was an emolument?
Senator, it's difficult to answer that question in the
Is it though, as an
abstract.
originalist? Isn't it pretty simple? You've got the clear language of the Constitution.
Senator, one has to look at the language, but also the history surrounding the Emoluments Clause in order to discern.
I am looking at the history. Let me move on to another question. As an originalist, do you believe that the Obergefell versus Hodges decision affirming constitutional right to same-sex marriage, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, Obergefell versus Hodges is binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
I'm aware of that. Do you believe it was wrongly decided?
Senator, as a circuit judge, I would be bound to follow
I understand that, but that's not responsive to my question. Had you been on the Court of Appeals prior to that decision, would you have decided the case that way?
Senator, prior to Obergefell versus Hodges, there was a prior Supreme Court case addressing the issue, and I would have followed that case.
Well, would you have reached the same conclusion as the Supreme Court in Obergefell?
Senator, I would have followed binding precedent.
You're not answering my question. Would you have reached the same conclusion?
Senator, the conclusions that the two precedents reached were potentially in conflict, and I would have to follow the precedent that...
So you can't tell us at this point whether you would have reached the same conclusion as the Supreme Court in Obergefell. So let me ask you about the Supreme Court's decision in Lawrence affirming a constitutional right to be intimate among same-sex couples. Do you believe that was wrongly decided?
Senator, Lawrence versus Texas is a binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
Again, I'm aware of that, but I'm asking you whether you believe that was rightly decided or wrongly decided.
Senator, you're asking about my personal views.
No, I'm asking you about your legal views. I'm asking about your legal views. Let me ask you about another case. Do you believe that Loving versus Virginia, which affirmed an interracial couple's right to marry, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, my wife and I are an interracial couple, and so if that case were wrongly decided, I would be in big trouble.
Okay, so you do agree with the reasoning of that case, and you're willing to say that. I appreciate that. But you're unwilling to say that you agree that Obergefell and Lawrence were correctly decided. Why is that?
Senator, again, those decisions are binding precedent of the Supreme Court, and I would be bound to follow.
I'm aware of that. So is Loving. And you're willing to tell us that you believe Loving was correctly decided, but you're not willing to say the other decisions were correctly decided. That seems less originalist and more situational. Let me ask you this about your role in the brief in Moore versus Harper. This was a case involving the discredited independent state legislature theory, which would allow a state legislature, even in the absence of a governor's signature, to effectively overturn an election. Do you believe that the Supreme Court wrongly decided Moore v. Harper when it rejected your view?
Senator, again, Moore v. Harper is binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, no, I get that, but you're still not answering my question. So let me ask you a different way. If a state legislature decided after an election to pass a bill, even in the absence of a governor signing it, to throw out absentee ballots that were mailed prior to the election but arrived after the election, would it be your view that a state Supreme Court or federal court would have to allow the legislature to overturn the election, would be powerless to correct that effort to overturn a free and fair election?
Senator, Moore versus Harper states that state courts can review what the state legislatures have passed as a matter of the Constitution.
No, I'm aware of that. And my concern, though, is that your unwillingness to embrace the reasoning of these decisions means that where there is room, and there is room in all of these decisions, and most particularly Moore v. Harper, for you as a Court of Appeals judge to narrow these decisions, it sounds like you'll take that opportunity to narrow those rights. And in the case of Moore, which I agree with Judge Luddick, the most important case to our democracy in a century, narrowing that decision means empowering state legislatures to overturn election results, and I cannot imagine a more dangerous idea on the bench. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Schiff, I'm calling on you now if you're ready. And we can wait a couple of seconds if you aren't ready. But when you start asking your questions, I'll ask you to adjourn the meeting when you're done, because I have to go to another meeting.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the courtesy of holding the hearing open for me. I greatly appreciate it. And I will be ready in one moment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize both the great value that UAV and drone technology have for law enforcement, and I can imagine innumerable productive and important uses, as well as the risks that drug cartels and others are using drones for their own nefarious purposes. But Mr. Willoughby, I want to ask you about a different kind of concern, and that is, we saw drones being used by DHS over Los Angeles during protests. And my understanding is that DHS policy requires that there be privacy protections when drones are used and may capture people engaged in First Amendment protected activity, among other things. And that drone footage is not allowed to be released without a law enforcement purpose or some other legitimate, analyzed, and approved function. Nonetheless, drone footage that was captured over Los Angeles was published by the agency. Why was it published? Who made that decision? And how is that consistent with DHS policy that is supposed to protect the privacy of those that are caught by drone footage?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'm not familiar with the use of drones for the positive law enforcement uses. My portfolio is strictly on countering the drone threats here in the homeland, but I can circle back and get you an answer to those questions with your permission.
Yes, if you would, I would appreciate that. As I said, I can more than understand the legitimate law enforcement purposes, but also deeply concerned about privacy interests and chilling First Amendment protected speech. As this technology proliferates, we're going to have to make sure that we protect those vital interests of the American people. Let me ask you about a different issue then, and I'll open this up to the whole panel. We've repeatedly seen, as we've battled wildfires in California, that spectators using drones have interfered with the firefighting efforts. There have been collisions with aircraft. There have been other times where aircraft had to be brought out of the fight until they could disable a drone or find its owner or whatnot. How recurrent is that particular challenge? What is the state of the technology to be able to disable a drone in flight or to identify where the user of the drone may be?
Maybe I'll start and then turn it over to my colleagues afterwards. The use of drones in these emergency response areas, whether it's firefighting or disaster relief or search and rescue, is prolific. And nearly every national incident that we hear about, most in the recent past, there have been unauthorized drones flying into space, interrupting authorized manned or unmanned operations. And for the most part, out of a abundance of caution, those manned operations are halted when there's an unauthorized drone detected in the area, which can severely debilitate our ability to respond in a timely fashion. And the ability to stop or prevent a drone from going somewhere is really restricted by the current authority that we have that's limited to just certain federal entities. And unless one of those entities is there providing a counter-UAS protection mission, we would not be able to stop an unauthorized drone from proceeding into a restricted area, even if there was a flight restriction in place, which is often the case during these emergency responses. But I'll pause to see if my colleagues have anything else.
That's an excellent point, Senator, and I think it illustrates the need to expand these authorities to state and locals. I'll give you an example. In the Los Angeles field office has developed over many years a robust relationship with the LA County Fire, LA County Sheriff, LAPD with regard to protection of wildfire areas from drones. But there, as you know, can be multiple wildfires in the greater Los Angeles area at any given time. And as we stated, the FBI cannot be everywhere. So the time is now for these agencies to get these authorities to protect wildfires and other public safety events.
And if you could speak to the
sort of the state of the art in terms of geofencing of drones. How capable is that of dealing with commercially available drones?
If you're referring to the geofencing on the drones themselves from the pilots, that is no longer really an applicable technology. Previously, some of the drone manufacturers did have some attempt to prevent people from flying into areas they shouldn't, and that has changed quite dramatically in the past 9 months. As far as our capabilities, we do have effective technologies, but there is no silver bullet in counter UAS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was supposed to adjourn, but I'm happy to turn it back over to Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fordyce, thank you for being here. Appreciate your work. During the first Trump administration, you oversaw the implementation of the Market Facilitation Program, as well as the Wildfire and Hurricane Indemnity Program. Both of those programs were implemented in such a way that, as I talked to farmers throughout California, they found that they had a lot of difficulty in accessing them because of the different nature of the specialty crops they grow than farmers in other parts of the country. Will you commit to working with me to ensure that any future rollout of USDA financial assistance is more fairly distributed? That is, that specialty crop farmers are equally able to access it as other farmers?
Yes, Senator, and thank you for that question. And I do appreciate very much the agriculture nature of the state of California. It is the most agriculture diverse state in the country. And I appreciate that and understand that fairly well. I wouldn't want to completely tell you that I know how all of those crops are grown, but do appreciate that. And I think you make a good point on the programs that you mentioned, and part of that was due to the fact that the agencies had not worked with those commodities, those crops, and those growers really before. And so, I felt like we were fairly innovative in trying to get the word out and the message out, and certainly through our outreach programs and communications programs, attempted to do that more on a personal level. But then we discovered that it would work much better if we were having those conversations with the organizations that represent those growers. And so United Fresh and others were organizations that we partnered with, which we had never partnered with before, to get that information out. And it was a little bit, it was probably a little bit of a slow start at the beginning of the program, but I think it became quite robust by the end of both of the programs that you mentioned. But absolutely, I would commit to working with you if there's another program similar to that to make sure we're talking to the right folks and getting the right message out there.
Great. I appreciate that, and we're happy to help facilitate those meetings with those associations. I also want to raise a concern about USDA's ongoing rollout of disaster funding as authorized by the American Relief Act of 2025. First, I'm concerned that the rules USDA has created in establishing block grants for states which face disaster in the past few years make it pretty much impossible for California to receive aid. Second, I hope that in the second round of the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program that it's developed in such a way that specialty crop and diversified farmers may more easily access relief. I recently sent a letter to the administration on this issue, and I know you're not currently at USDA, but are you committed to working together on this matter and others so that we can make sure that California and specialty crop producers more generally receive their fair degree of USDA support? And just to give an illustration, some of the disaster relief is focused on hurricanes and only hurricanes. We've had hurricanes that turned into tropical storms when they went inland that did a lot of damage. And of course, we've been ravaged by atmospheric rivers and the flooding that they result in, and fires. And so to exclude certain disasters and only include others that, frankly, are visited on other states seems very inequitable for the West. So I want to make sure you're committed to working on that issue as well to make sure that these decisions are made in a nonpartisan and non-geographic way that is accessible for all farmers throughout the country.
Yes, Senator, absolutely would commit to that. And I can't speak much to the progress of those disaster programs or the cause of loss for the declarations, but yes, would commit to certainly working with you moving forward.
One other issue, if I could. Over a third of the country's vegetables and 3/4 of the country's fruits and nuts are grown in California, but just 9% of farms growing specialty crops are insured. Given your past experience at USDA, can you speak to the challenges that specialty crop producers face in accessing crop insurance and what you think you can do as Undersecretary to address it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, I know that the Risk Management Agency or the NAP program through the Farm Service Agency insures, and we talked about this just a little bit ago, and I'm not sure how many crops that is, but it's a lot. And, you know, I think if there's not a safety net risk management product available to a specific crop grown in California, there is a process at RMA by which we can start the process to look at the opportunities to potentially have a product that is available to them. But I would commit that we'll be taking a look at that.
I appreciate it. And I think some of the challenge, Chairman, is that these specialty crops and trees that are a long-term investment are really different, and some of the historic practices that go into some of these grant applications are more suitable and easier to access if you're a commodity crop grower. So it may also require some modifications to make sure that all farmers can participate. But thank you, Mr. Chair. Professor, you've appeared before the committee many times, but the last time you were in committee was for a hearing entitled, "When the President Does It, That Means It's Not Illegal, the Supreme Court's Unprecedented Immunity Decision." At the time, you described that immunity decision as modest, and I want to ask you about the modest impact of that decision. When John Sauer was here for his confirmation hearing, I asked him about an argument he made in that case before the Court of Appeals, in which he was asked specifically by the Court of Appeals judge, one of them, if the President were to order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent, would he be immune? His answer apparently was yes, unless the President's party was willing to impeach him first. Is that your view as well? Would he be immune from prosecution for using the military to assassinate a political opponent?
Well, Senator, as a lower court judge, I'd be fully bound by Supreme Court precedent. On that particular question, and this is one reason I address the opinion as modest, the opinion addresses only portions of presidential immunity. It specifically is addressing criminal immunity.
I asked you a specific question. Would the President be immune from prosecution if he ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent? No.
Senator, under the Supreme Court precedent on that question, the Supreme Court has specifically not answered it.
Is that a difficult question? Is that an open question in your view?
Well, Senator, under the contours of Trump versus United States, which deals with criminal immunity, I'm not sure that it fully answers all of the political mechanisms that would be in place to address and keep such a horrific situation from ever occurring.
So you're unclear as to whether a president could be prosecuted for that. Is that what you're saying? You don't know the answer?
Well, I think what I'm saying is that within the particular contours of criminal immunity discussed in that opinion, it addresses actually what is an official act. And so I think the first threshold question would be whether one could ever conceive of such a thing as an unofficial act.
I don't want to filibuster my question. It's very simple. If the president tomorrow to order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent, in your view, is he immune from criminal prosecution absent an impeachment first?
If it's not an official act, a phrase that has not yet been fully defined,
if he's using the military to do it, which the court said he has absolute immunity when he deploys the military, is he immune or not?
Well, I don't read the court's decision to say that any use of the military outside of official acts comes within its immunity contours. And as this body knows, because of various drone strikes and other things.
So under the question I asked you, what's the answer, Professor? Yes or no? You're used to answering questions and asking your student questions. I'm asking you a very simple question. Yes or no? Is the president immune if he uses SEAL Team 6 to kill a political opponent?
Senator,
Yes
with,
or no?
with respect, I
Okay,
think the Supreme
with respect,
Court.
you're not willing to answer the question. Let me ask you a different question. It was recently reported that the president and his family made around $6 billion from the sale of crypto assets. Some of that money, much of that money, comes from the Gulf. If the president were to sell a foreign policy decision to a Gulf nation in exchange for a crypto donation, is he immune from prosecution for that?
Senator, I don't know anything about the situation that you are describing.
Well,
As I have
but you
said,
know something about the immunity decision. You said it was modest. I'm trying to determine just how modest you think it is. Can the president sell U.S. foreign policy to the highest crypto donor and have a get-out-of-jail-free card?
Senator,
Or is he liable for prosecution?
Senator, if I may, the Constitution has many constraints for all of us
You
to
don't want
carry it
to. You
out.
don't want to
Well,
answer that question. Let me ask you a very different question. If the president were to use the military in direct violation of court order, deliberately, knowingly, blatantly use the military in violation of court order, is he immune from any liability?
Senator, as I said when I testified last September about the decision, the Clinton administration had an opinion.
I'm not asking about the Clinton administration.
But it's directly relevant. That a president, the position of the Clinton administration is that the president,
I'm not asking
while
the position
serving-
of the Clinton administration. I'm asking your position, your view of the immunity decision, which you've described as modest. I'm trying to determine just how modest you think it is. You're
So-
unwilling to say a president can't kill an opponent and be liable. You're unwilling to say the president can't sell foreign policy of the United States for cryptocurrency. You're unwilling to say he can't do that and still be immune. My question is, can he use the military in deliberate violation of court order and be immune, yes or no?
Senator, you're asking very specific questions about whether our criminal justice system is the
Madam
forum
Chair,
to
I yield
punish.
back.
Thank you. I'd like to enter into the record a letter from 48 former Justice Department officials that are familiar with Professor Mascott's work. They explained, quote, her academic scholarship has been cited in Supreme Court opinions. She has argued high-stakes federal cases, and she has submitted scores of briefs in courts across the country. Mrs. Mascott has been a world-class mentor to hundreds of aspiring lawyers. She was also a standout attorney at the Department of Justice, and her judgment is beyond reproach. She will make an excellent judge, end quote. Without objection.
The chair recognizes Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wright, you acknowledged earlier in the hearing being present when one of the DOJ representatives made a comment about rubber stamping decisions made elsewhere. Can you tell us exactly what the comment was and who made the comment?
Thank you so much. So that meeting happened in early June, if I remember correctly, subject to check. I was contacted by Mike Goff and at DOE. He and Ted Garish wanted to come over and talk about the executive order for DOE and DOD. They came on a Friday morning, and we had started our meeting, and there were three people who came in. Adam Blake, who was, I mentioned him earlier, he had two other people with him. One was a lady, an attorney. I don't remember her last name. I think her first name was Alicia. And then there was another attorney there by the name of Seth Cohen. And in that meeting, it was actually Seth Cohen that used the rubber stamp comment. And it was when they walked in, I stopped the meeting and I let Mr. Blake introduce the others. And when I started the meeting back, I told him, I said, we were just talking about the executive order for DOE and DOD, and that's when the comment was made. He said, "Oh, well, y'all are basically going to put in a practice that's going to sort of rubber stamp what they do." And I said, "Well, we don't."
And he was referring to rubber stamp the decisions made by DOE and DOD?
No, maybe. I didn't press him on that. I didn't ask him about that. All I said
was it a sense that he was suggesting that the NRC was simply going to rubber stamp what the nuclear industry wanted?
No, because I pushed back. That's what was in the
No,
article.
but what was that? Was that his suggestion? That his expectation was that the NRC was now going to be rubber stamped for the industry?
I think he was thinking the intent of that, whatever the executive order was.
So that's how he was interpreting the executive order.
Whether he chose the right words or not, I don't know, but we pushed back and said we don't rubber stamp the meeting that we were having with DOE and DOD.
Commissioner, I'm grateful that you pushed back. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to get understanding of how he views your role, which is obviously alarming to everyone who's concerned about nuclear safety. Let me ask a related question to each of you, and I'll start, Mr. Marzano, with you. Should you decide that a nuclear design is unsafe, notwithstanding the wishes of DOE or DOD or anyone else, do you think you're at risk of being fired from the commission by a president who has demonstrated willingness to fire commissioners without cause?
Well, I certainly think that we've seen that happen, and I think there's pressure. But ultimately, the NRC will not license a reactor that is unsafe. If that does not meet our standards, we will not approve such a design.
But you acknowledge that it's very possible, should you decide that a reactor design is unsafe and vote that way, that you may be fired by the administration?
I think that's a possibility, yes.
Mr. Crowell, is that a possibility in your view?
I think on any given day, I could be fired by the administration for reasons unknown.
Mr. Wright, do you think you'd be fired if you should decide against the administration's desires that a nuclear reactor design is unsafe?
It doesn't matter. I'm going to make the right decision, and I'll stand by that decision.
But you acknowledge you have to at least be concerned. You have to be concerned about the possibility you'll be fired for it.
I don't know. In my mind, it's speculation. It's talking. It's not something. But I'm going to make the right decision. Period.
It may be speculation, Chairman. But if you and the other commissioners have to be concerned that if you make a decision in the interest of public safety that runs afoul of the desire of the administration to approve something on a short timetable, that you'll be fired. That's not a conducive situation to nuclear safety. Would you agree? If you have to worry about being fired for making the right decision?
Well, I may look at it a little bit differently than how you're saying it.
Well, let me ask you this. The timetable says now within 12 months or 18 months you have to approve or reject a design. What if you don't have the information in 12 or 18 months? Do you have to vote on it regardless?
No, the 12 and 18 months is actually for, you've got 12 months, 18 months on the construction side, then you have another 12 or 18 months to do the other part of it.
And if you don't have sufficient information within that timetable?
Again, if you don't have a decision, information to make a safety decision or to approve an application, you don't approve it.
So you can ignore the timetable if you don't believe you have sufficient information?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But the Comey FBI failed to review the evidence at the time. After nearly a decade in the shadows, this information has now come to light thanks to Dr. Patel, or Director Patel. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, during your confirmation hearing, you made several important commitments. For instance, you told Senator Coons there will be no politicization at the FBI. There'll be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as FBI director. So let me ask you very specifically, did you ever take any action to terminate or discipline an FBI agent or employee in whole or in part as retribution for being part of an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th?
No.
You also committed, you assured Senator Blumenthal, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. So you're testifying today that you played no role in the firing of even a single FBI agent for political retribution.
None for political retribution.
And if any FBI agent said you did, they would be lying. Is that your testimony?
I'm only speaking to my actions. Everybody is allowed to make their allegations.
Oh, no, these are allegations against you.
And
so, Mr. Patel, if FBI, senior FBI agents or employees said that you were firing them for political retribution reasons because of the cases they were assigned, you're saying they would be lying. Is that
anyone that was terminated at the FBI was done so for failing to meet the standards, uphold their constitutional oath, and effectuate the mission.
Well, by meet the standards, are you talking about meet the standards of protecting the president under any circumstance?
No.
You also guaranteed Senator Blumenthal that every FBI employee will be held to the same, absolute same standard. No one will be terminated for case assignments. Are you testifying today that you never terminated anyone at the FBI, in whole or in part, because of a prior case assignment?
No one at the FBI is terminated for case assignments alone.
Well, I'm asking about you, Mr. Patel. Did you, in whole or in part, terminate anyone at the FBI because they worked on the Trump investigation or because they worked on January 6th?
No one at the FBI has been terminated for case assignments alone.
Okay, you're saying alone. Does that mean they were terminated in part because they were assigned to a January 6th case or assigned to the Mar-a-Lago case? You're being very precise here, Mr. Patel. You're saying alone. That means they were fired in part because they were assigned those cases. Is that your testimony?
Absolutely not. But if you want to keep
Okay,
putting words
well,
in my mouth,
then
go
let me
ahead.
ask you, let's strip away the word alone. Did you terminate or participate in any discipline of any FBI employee in whole or in part because of their work on an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th? Yes or no?
Any terminations at the FBI by employees?
No, I'm
since
asking you a very specific
and I'm
question.
going to answer the question, but you don't like the answer because it's the
No,
truth
I
and it guts
want
your
an answer to my
narrative.
question. I don't want an answer to someone else's question. So let me just be precise, and I ask for a yes or no answer. Did you ever terminate or discipline an FBI employee in whole or in part because they had been assigned or worked on an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th?
FBI
yes or no?
employees are only terminated
Yes
if
or
they
no,
fail
Mr.
to
Patel?
uphold their oaths of
Yes or
office
no?
and duty.
You're not
at the
answering my
FBI
question.
I
You're
don't
not
have to
answering my
answer your question yes or no because you're setting up a trap so you can have a media
I'm
narrative.
not setting up a trap.
And I'm not giving it to you.
Unless it's true that you fired people.
People
in
have
whole
been
or in part
terminated at
because
the
they-
FBI who fail to uphold
You're
the
assigned
standards
to.
that the FBI requires them to uphold.
Did you tell anyone at the FBI that all FBI employees who they identified who had worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
Say that I would remove people for case assignments?
That you would, that people that were identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs. Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
People are not removed
But
for
just
case
answer my question.
assignments.
Just answer my question. Did you tell that to
People
someone?
are not removed for case
No,
assignments.
you're not
and
answering
I
my
would-
question.
And I would
Mr.
never
Patel,
tell anyone.
Did you tell someone at the FBI that FBI employees identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Yes or no? Did you tell someone that?
I would never tell anyone at the FBI that they're being removed for basically their case assignments.
Okay, so anyone who had said that would be lying. Is that your testimony?
Anyone can say whatever they want.
No, I know, but you're saying they were a liar.
I'm telling you what I said.
Because this is in the complaint against you, Mr. Patel. So you're saying Mr. Driscoll and others are liars?
I'm not going to address the complaint and the ongoing
Okay, well then let me ask
litigation.
you, have you ever told anyone at the FBI that the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it, and that your job depended on the removal of agents who worked on cases against the president?
No.
Did you ever tell anyone that?
No.
Okay. Did you ever tell anyone that you knew these summary firings you were undertaking were illegal, likely illegal, and that you would be sued and later deposed? Did you ever tell anyone that?
No firings at the FBI or terminations were done for anything other than justified
Did you ever
cause.
tell anyone that, Mr.
No,
Patel? Why don't you
no
answer my question?
terminations at the FBI were ever done in my tenure for anything other than failing
Did you ever
to
tell
uphold
anyone
their
that,
oath of
Mr. Patel? You willing to
office
answer
or
the
their-
question?
The FBI.
I guess
I
you're
have
not willing to
answered
answer the
it.
question. So let me move on. Let me
Repeatedly.
move on to the Epstein files. You said you're the most transparent FBI director in history, so I'm going to put you to the test. In 2024, you were asked by Glenn Beck about Epstein's Black Book. And you said, he asked, who has Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? And you said, Black Book FBI. And he said, but who? That is, I mean theirs. And you said, oh, that's under the direct control of the director of the FBI. That's what you said. Was that true, Mr. Patel?
I'll rely on you quoting it accurately. I did that a couple
Was
of
it
years
true
ago.
what you represented to Mr. Beck and the president's supporters out there, or were you lying? Was it true that the black book, Epstein's black book, was in the possession of the FBI director?
The black book was in the possession of the FBI.
Okay, so now that you're the FBI director, you have possession of the black book, right?
That index has been released.
So you have Jeffrey Epstein's black book?
What is known as Jeffrey Epstein's black book has been released by us.
And you released it. And let me follow up on Senator Kennedy's question, because he asked you, and I'll be very precise here. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself? And you said, himself. There's no credible information, none. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And Kennedy, the information we have, again, is limited. And Senator Kennedy said, the answer is no one. And you said, for the information we have. So is it your testimony today that in all the Epstein files, that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked no one to anyone but himself? Is that your testimony, Mr.
I never said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic anyone else.
Did he traffic any young woman to someone other than himself? That was Mr. Kennedy's question, Senator Kennedy's question.
The information that 3 administrations have had access to have made determinations that there are no investigative leads that were credible to prosecute and investigate any others. I'm specifically stating
whether it's
we were
your
working
testimony today.
Well, you just read it, and I said it 10 minutes ago, so let the record reflect my testimony.
I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding, because there are victims like Virginia Guifer who have testified otherwise, who have said otherwise, and you're telling the American people today that the Epstein list is a single name and it's Jeffrey Epstein. That's what we're to believe?
That's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying, and you can say whatever you want.
Let me ask you this. When Todd Blanche went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, she said, but did I think these guys were coming for that? I really don't. If you met Epstein, there's no way that this cast of characters, of which it's extraordinary, and some are in your cabinet, who you value as your co-workers, and you know would be with him if he was a creep or because they wanted sexual favors. A man wants sexual favors, he will find that. They didn't have to come to Epstein for that. And the next question Todd Blanche, the president's former criminal defense lawyer, asked is not who in the cabinet, who are you referring to? His question is, so when's the last time you think you were with Mr. Epstein when he got a massage? So let me ask you, who are those cabinet members that Ghislaine Maxwell was referring to that, that were part of this cast of characters associated with Mr. Epstein? Who are they?
The Deputy Attorney General took the aggressive step that no one else did and interviewed Ms. Maxwell for 2 days, and we released the entirety of that transcript.
Who are the cabinet members?
I do not have that transcript in front of me. You're picking it piecemeal. The American public can read the entirety of that.
Let me ask you one last question, because you clearly won't tell us the cabinet members associated with Mr. Epstein. Let me ask you one last question, and that is, right after she gives this testimony, in front of an FBI agent, among others, she's transferred to a minimum security prison not suitable for a sex offender like herself. Who made that decision and why?
The Bureau of Prisons.
The Bureau of Decisions made it in
prisons.
The Bureau of Prisons decided on their own, without any consultation with Blanche or anyone else, that they were going to suddenly, after this interview, completely unrelated to this interview, completely unrelated to anything she said, move her to a prison not suitable for a sex offender. You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No. I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates. What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. And we have countlessly proven you to be a liar in Russiagate, in January 6th. You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution and an utter coward.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised that you continue to lie from your perch and put on a show so you can go raise money for your charade. You are a political buffoon at best.
Well, you can take an internet troll.
Take it to the bank that the FBI is protecting this country and the state and citizens of the California. We are bringing historic reform.
Point of order.
But all you care about is a child sex predator that was prosecuted by a prior administration, and the Obama Justice Department and the Biden Justice Department did squat. And what did President Trump do? Bring new charges courageously. And what have we done?
Chairman,
You said
take
I'm the
control
most
of the
transparent
situation.
FBI director in history. 33,000 pages of information to you. I challenge you to say anything credibly to the truth. Go ahead and run to the cameras where you want to go now.
Both of you be quiet. Before I go to Senator Tillis, without objection, want to introduce into the record the Durham Annex. The Durham Annex is a declassified appendix to John Durham's report about Crossfire Hurricane.
Attorney General Bondi, at your confirmation hearing in January, made a clear commitment you would not politicize your position. We are here today at your first oversight hearing 9 months into your tenure, at a time when hundreds of career prosecutors have quit because they were required to take unethical actions at odds with that promise, or feared that they would have to take such actions if they remained on the job. When over 1,000 former federal prosecutors have sounded the alarm about the unprecedented degree to which the powers of DOJ are being abused to go after the president's enemies. I approach this hearing with a heavy heart. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I served in a department that, whether it was under a Democratic or Republican president, would never use the office to go after the president's enemies or to hide the corruption of his friends. But today, the Justice Department has been used to cover up the possible corruption of the mayor of New York or of a high-level administration official taking $50,000 reportedly in cash in a bag, or a child sex predator who befriended the president and some of his cabinet members. And instead of preventing partisan weaponization, your department has engaged in a brazenly political prosecution at the president's explicit direction. The department has become President Trump's personal sword and shield to go after his ever-growing list of political enemies and to protect himself, his allies, and associates. My questions therefore focus on these two themes: hiding the corrupt acts of his friends and prioritizing the political prosecution of his enemies. So let me start with the shocking allegations of bribery and pay to play. 2 weeks ago, 4 major media outlets reported that Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today, I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean—
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you. What is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as
I understand,
Attorney
but do
General.
you know?
I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether
All
he
I
took the money?
know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Levitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
And,
was she?
Senator Schiff,
Was she
if
right?
you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured
No,
by Congress for lying with your
we can
egregious
stipulate to. You can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
personal attacks. You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
But what we're interested in.
Borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You want your
So
no,
you were
oversight.
asked
You want your 5
by my
minutes of
colleague.
fame
You were asked by my colleague.
attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Holman taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you
You
support?
don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is
then-
not
then-
my decision.
then-
I
and
said
you- and
you
you
can
don't
talk
have
to
to-
Director
you
Patel.
don't have to try to-
You think
you
you've
don't
got a
have to-
gotcha with Tom Home and our borders are,
Excuse me. You
who's
don't-
been out there
excuse me.
fighting for our country since
Madam Chair,
Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask you a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed I believe the American people, should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump
So
for
I
trying
guess,
to
I
impeach
guess the
him
answer is you won't support that
after
request.
you now know that
So
Joe
let me-
Biden tried
let
to
me
cover up
do
Hunter
this.
Biden's involvement with
Excuse
Ukraine?
me. Let me do this because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You
were
have a
asked,
law degree,
excuse
Senator
me,
Schiff?
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
You can attack me later,
career.
and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day today.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair, I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
What
the
about
current
the
president.
fires in California?
And
Do you
this
care
is
about that,
supposed to
Senator
be,
Schiff?
this is, excuse me, this is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about
Are the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
when will it be
your entire career,
that
frankly.
the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're a failed lawyer because you don't understand when someone can and cannot
refuse
answer
to
a
accept
question.
personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander?
With
Will
that,
you
Madam
apologize
Chair,
to Donald
I yield
Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator Brett.
May I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction into the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising the alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce, with unanimous consent, the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter for Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes by urging officials to do the right thing for the right reasons, to follow the facts and the law, and raises the alarm that the decision to remove experienced career officials from U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, and critical parts of DOJ undermines our country's abilities to counter terrorist organizations, malign nation-state actors, and countless others that seek to harm our nation and its citizens. And he believes that the priority is prosecuting the president's enemies
are you admitting
rather
that?
than protecting the country.
1 moment.
May I have unanimous consent
Are
to
you
enter
entering
these
that
into the record?
without objection?
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Brett.
Senator Moody, may I clarify one thing he entered in the record? I just want to say that I believe he entered a letter by 200 and something former employees. Well, I believe the spokesperson for that letter was also the spokesperson for Jack Smith.
Senator Brett. Thank you, Madam Chair. General
All right, thank you, Chairman. In 2024, USPTO issued guidance on patent eligibility to help examiners and stakeholders evaluate whether AI-related inventions are eligible. Late last month, Director John Squires issued an opinion signaling even stronger support for AI-related inventions, clearing the Section 101 threshold. Mr. Kapos, let me start with you. I'd be interested in your thoughts on what AI-related inventions you believe should be eligible for a patent, what AI-related inventions you think should not be eligible. Is there a risk that allowing every AI-related invention to be patented could stifle innovation, and how do we ensure that the Patent Office strikes the right balance?
Well, thank you, Senator Schiff, for the question. So first of all, I would tell you that I applaud the recent changes made to the USPTO's eligibility guidelines by Director Squires, and I think also Deputy Director Coke Morgan Stewart before Director Squires got into his job. I think that they lend additional clarity and expansiveness to eligibility for AI-related inventions. I would echo some of the examples that you gave earlier, Senator Schiff, in terms of where the limit should be. Mathematical algorithms, mathematical formulas equals MC squared, pi, things like that, not eligible. They never were. They wouldn't be under PIRA. They shouldn't be, even if implemented or somehow related to AI. But practical applications of them, use in advancing computer technology, broadly stated, absolutely should be eligible. And the much more suited tests of sections 102, novelty, 103, obviousness, and 112, written description, are the tests that always did and should be returned to their role of doing the heavy lifting to determine what gets patented and what doesn't.
Well, thank you. Let me turn, if I can, to the diagnostic test issue. Ms. Cohen, you made a compelling argument regarding the lack of patentability and therefore the lack of investment. I'd be curious whether any of you want to share a counter argument. What is the case to be made for the lack of patentability? Is this just the courts getting it wrong? Is there a different balance that should be struck? What are the trade-offs here?
Happy to start with that, Senator Schiff, and it's a great question. So look, we all care about ourselves and our loved ones getting access to medical diagnostics. That is super important, and we all care about those diagnostics being appropriately priced, and we're all upset when they're not appropriately priced. So I think, broad agreement that pricing in diagnostics needs to be reasonable and fair. But pricing is a very different issue from patent eligibility. Patent eligibility is about whether the diagnostic exists in the first place, whether the cure is there to be priced at some price. Once the cure is there, once the patent system has done its job and broad eligibility has incented research and development and moving that through the FDA clinical approval process to make a diagnostic or drug available, fine, we should have very tough discussions about pricing, but we need to put them in totally different categories because the diagnostic that doesn't exist because the incentives weren't there might as well be priced at infinity.
Anyone have a different view?
No, but I don't. I suspect on the next panel you'll find at least one witness who does. But Senator, one point I want to add to what Director Kapos just said is the bottom line is currently de facto under the court rulings, various court rulings, there are no patents on diagnostic techniques in the United States. And one has to ask, who made that decision? If the United States decides not to protect by patent such a huge area of, an important area of technology, it seems to me that that needs to be subject to debate in this body and decision in a democratic way in this body. That is why, in my view, it is so important for Congress to return to legislating here, where it hasn't done any since 1793, to address issues just like this. My personal view, and all my testimony today is just my own personal capacity, is that diagnostics are critically important technology, and we want to incentivize innovation in that area and investment in that area to bring more and more such new techniques that cure patients, treat patients, and overall increase improve the human condition. That's my view. And for that, you need to have patent eligibility in that space. And again, that doesn't mean that you're going to grant patents to all of those applications. You still have to make sure that the application, the invention is new, non-obvious, precise enough, and so on. But at least from an eligibility point of view, I don't think Congress has ever said that the United States should exclude that area of technology.
Thank you, Chairman.
The time, sir.
Tragic. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dubra, first of all, thank you for taking the time to meet with my staff. I appreciate that. I served in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles. I was also in the public corruption, government fraud section, prosecuted corrupt government officials, fraud cases, an espionage case against a FBI agent who spied for the Russians. In all the time I was in the office for about 6 years, so considerably less time than you were. But nevertheless, never had any political figure contact me to tell me, you should bring a case against so-and-so, or you should refrain from bringing a case against so-and-so.
never had that experience, and I worked predominantly under Republican attorney generals until I think the end of my tenure in the U.S. attorneys. Was that your experience as well? Did you ever have a political figure tell you who you should prosecute or that you should refrain from prosecuting someone?
Senator, I enjoyed the meeting with your staff yesterday. I see them behind you. We had a great discussion. I thank you for that opportunity to be in your office. And the answer to your question is no. Nobody's ever told me to prosecute a specific person or not to prosecute a specific person.
And how would you handle a circumstance where someone did tell you to prosecute someone, or that conversely you should drop a case against someone for political reasons?
Those who are responsible for my nomination, sir, I'm confident that they know my background. I'm confident that they know I've never done that and will never do it. And I'm confident that they know that I will only follow the facts as applied to the law. As I said before to Ranking Member Durbin's question, any kind of public corruption investigation, and you know this from your 6 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Central District of California, there has to be predication. You can't just investigate somebody to investigate somebody. There has to be specific and articulable facts that predicate an investigation. And I've evaluated that even to start an investigation and worked hand in hand with the FBI when I've done my local public corruption cases, my state-based public corruption cases, and the nationwide public corruption cases that I've investigated. If you don't have it, you don't start it.
You know, Mr. I heard you make a similar response to Senator Durbin in terms of you don't think you'll be put in that position. And it calls to mind a conversation I had with Mr. Blanche prior to his confirmation, when I think he expressed the same view. I'm not going to be put in that position. And we've heard that from any number of nominees in this administration. I don't expect I'll ever be put in the position that you're describing, and yet they almost all have. I'm grateful for your optimism, but I think it probably is only a matter of time before you're put in that position. And as my colleagues have indicated, I think the question is how will you respond when you are put in that position, not whether it will ever come up. So let me ask you this. Ever since Watergate, there has been a strong norm, guardrail, that has maintained the independence of the Justice Department from pressure from the White House. This was part of the post-Watergate reforms. And it served our country remarkably well in insulating the department from political pressure. Presidents over the course of years have set general policies. I want to see more prosecution of drug cases, or I want to see more prosecution of corruption cases, or I want to see more prosecution of illegal immigration cases. But since Watergate and until now, we have not seen a White House identify individuals they want prosecuted. This goes beyond anything I think we saw during Watergate. So let me ask you as a general matter, what is your view of the desirability, I think necessity, of maintaining the independence of the Justice Department from political pressure emanating from the White House?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I look forward to, of course, my direct report will be Deputy Attorney Blanche, who you mentioned. And I've had multiple interactions with him. I believe he's doing a great job. And I look forward to working with him to do what we've always done. He was an AUSA in the Southern District of New York, just like you, just like me. And I really don't believe I'll be put in that division. When you look at the components of the criminal division and what we do, these are nationwide impact cases for all Americans. Should I be tasked with evaluating a public corruption case like you're talking about, whatever that case may be, I can assure you I will do it how I've always done it, and that will be based on the facts and the law and the independent decisions of the Justice Department to make those charging decisions, and that's exactly how I'll operate, sir.
Well, Ms. Duva, I appreciate what I would describe as the triumph of hope over experience in your testimony, but I hope your experience is commensurate with your hope, but I fear it will be otherwise, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, congratulations.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wilk, during your time as acting deputy undersecretary at FNS, the agency demanded that states provide USDA with personal data belonging to tens of millions of SNAP recipients and applicants. This information includes names, birthdays, addresses, social security numbers, and immigration status. The guidance also states that USDA has the authority to disclose any of this personal data to any government entity they deem necessary, including foreign governments. Mr. Wolk, can you tell us what the legal authority is that USDA is relying on to collect, store, and share the personal data of tens of millions of Americans, including social security numbers, home addresses, simply because they received or applied for SNAP benefits?
Senator, I appreciate that question. My understanding is there were 4 requests for state data, for state recipient data. One of the requests was made in May, and so I was at FNCS. But as I recall, I had no involvement in drafting or issuing that particular request. But I was aware of what was going on. I would say I know that there is a lawsuit brought by numerous attorneys generals, and I hesitate to give my opinion in terms of what that authority might be because that may be an issue in the case.
Mr. Walk, if confirmed, are you committed to reviewing this policy independently, objectively, to ensure that it does not violate federal privacy laws which protect Americans' personal data and identities?
Sir, I appreciate that question, and I will say that I think the collection of data itself is something that we need to look at in general. As a 24-year federal employee, I certainly understand the privacy implications and that we have laws that protect data throughout the information life cycle from collection to transmission to storage to disposal. And I want to make sure that as we use the data technologies, which carries promise, that we also make sure that we deploy them in a way that abides by the law.
I think part of the challenge that many of us have is the inspector generals across the federal government were fired. No cause was provided, no notice was provided. And we need those positions to be people of independence and the strength of character to blow the whistle if something is going on that is inappropriate, unethical, or unlawful. Were you to determine that either this policy, this collection of data violated the law, or some other practice did, are you prepared to inform Congress that the agency is operating in violation of law or ethics?
Senator, the Inspector General Act requires that the Inspector General keeps Congress currently and fully informed of all deficiencies and problems in its operations, so I will follow that statute.
Is the answer yes, then? If you were to find this policy or another policy in violation of the law, would you inform Congress?
Senator, yes, I would fulfill my obligation to Congress.
So you would inform Congress?
If I would have informed Congress of our findings, yes.
Okay. You seem reluctant to make that commitment. It shouldn't be difficult. If you discover there's a violation of the law going on and you're required by statute to inform Congress, you should inform Congress, and there shouldn't be any hesitation about it. Let me just ask briefly in the time that I've left, Ms. Harrell, thank you for being here today and for meeting with my staff. Senator Smith and I, along with other members of the committee, sent a letter to USDA inquiring about the nature of canceled grants, according to a June 17 departmental announcement. I'm deeply concerned that these cancellations have directly impacted farmers in my state and other states and adversely impacted their ability to sustain and grow their businesses. We have yet to receive a response. Can you assure our offices that we will get an answer to that inquiry and others that we direct to you?
Yes, thank you, Senator. And in my opening remarks, I had mentioned that it is the priority to
be responsive. Responsiveness has to be the first priority for OCR because we need to be working collaboratively so that you have correct information to share with your constituents. And I myself, you weren't here at the time, I myself, as a member of the House, had inquired had a letter of inquiry over at OCR, and it took over 600 days for a response. Completely unacceptable. So I understand the importance of getting this information to you quickly. I believe we can modernize the way we're responding, and if confirmed, again, the responsiveness will be our first priority to ensure you have the information you need.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.